All right, everyone. Welcome to episode 27 with Pours with Patriots and our first ever Coast Guard Coast Guardsman, whatever
Coast
you want to
Guardsman.
call Coast Guardsman. But what you haven't
Coast
met,
Guard
yeah,
member.
we tried to keep it easy for the past 5 minutes, but we've been making fun of him a little bit. And just how painful it was to have the U.S. Coast Guard flag up there, but we finally have it going.
It's the ensign, but
Yeah.
that's all right.
Yeah, we're now we just have to check
We
off
know
one
what your ASAP score was.
one obscure branch, which is the Space Force. We'll get that soon, but I want to welcome my guest. He came down today from Cleveland, so I appreciate the long drive, couple-hour drive. Today, if you haven't been paying attention this week, we are joined by Lieutenant Commander Michael Walker, United States Coast Guard, as we can't say by the shirt. He has a hat too. He's not wearing it, thank God, and the flag behind us. So, welcome, Michael.
What, the UK hat would get me in trouble?
No, I'm kidding. He actually he's a Kentucky guy. He's jumping ahead of us, which is great. But thanks for coming down.
Yeah,
thanks for being the first Coast Guardsman. It's
brother.
exciting.
Absolutely,
it's exciting.
Absolutely.
And Russ Larry, who's my old police chief, he used to be in the Coast Guard. So any joke that I make about the Coast Guard, it's well deserved. So we're gonna start. It wasn't easy to find a Coast Guard quote. There's a lot of memes making fun of the Coast Guard.
Yeah,
so I didn't want to make fun of the Coast Guard. So there's a lot of good ones that do that. So I try to find one that was respectful, and not funny. But feel free, anyone tonight, post all your Coast Guard memes. This is your time for you Navy guys and Air Force guys to stick it to the Coast Guard. So
the Navy guys will try.
Yeah. So we'll start with our quote here for the Coast Guard. I thought this was a good one. It says it's a simple one, but it says the Coast Guard has long been known as the armed force service that gets more done for less, for Mr. Howard Coble. So it is an armed forces branch. A lot of people, we make a lot of jokes about it, but has a very important mission, has been around for a long time, actually, which is surprising, right?
The wild part about the Coast Guard is every mission that we have, and it used to be when I came in 2009, it was 12 statutory missions. You think about things that happen on the water. So everybody thinks about the Guardian. Some people that might remember Clear and Present Danger, there was a good Coast Guard scene there. But you have the old U.S. Lighthouse Service. Now that's our aids to navigation mission. You have the life-saving service, so that's search and rescue. Steamboat inspection service. Now you have what are called our marine inspection folks. There are all kinds of missions that we have of military nature, and it's interesting because we kind of have to have a customer-facing component too, because we're working with industry and we're regulators at the same time, and then we're law enforcement at the same time. So there's all kinds of stuff going on.
Yeah, it is an interesting brand. It was one of the things you do look at. Like the Guardian, I think, is the most famous.
Still haven't watched it. Right? Won't watch it.
What? Really? It's so
Ashton
good,
Kutcher
man.
Was good, and
Kevin
that
Costner.
70s show. Kevin Costner's cool.
But it's a good story. I mean, it brings I think every branch has what everybody knows about, and I think one of the high speed people, the Coast Guard people, will say are the rescue divers.
Absolutely, the rescue swimmers.
Athletes.
They are good guys, and it is amazing what they do, and it's amazing how they train to do it too.
Yeah,
because it's just. I think of too. You got the rescue swimmers. They will go into whatever water to save somebody. And then you've got like our surfmen you'll see the videos of the boats where they're kind of flipping over and they keep on going. There's a lot of storied history. And, it's as much as, because a lot of you guys are combat arms guys. I mean, we do have that life-saving mission and protection of life at sea mission as equally close as we do our national defense missions. Right. You mentioned the Navy, like when you go through training, you'll talk about, you'll say the Navy is the hard nucleus about which the Coast Guard forms in a time of war. I mean, you all have been through some kind of training. You had to memorize stuff. And I just remember that's one of the things we had to memorize. But
they brainwashed you well.
I try.
But no, I mean, I think there's another one is what's the perfect storm? Great. That's a great, that's a great, that's a true story.
And I didn't even think about this. My first unit, my XO was on that ship. And he's like, yeah, it was that bad.
Yeah.
You're right. You're absolutely right about that.
Yeah, because I think in that movie, the real story is that actually Coast Guard Jayhawk went down after they ran out of fuel because they were trying to rescue people. And I think did both the pilots pass? Or I think one, or I can't remember what it was. But that's like a more the Guardians kind of made up. But
I mean, the Guardian, from the parts I've seen, it is a good movie, and but it's funny because I got such a messed up brain. Like I'm seeing the captain and the Guardian. I'm like, oh, that's the Kurgan from Highlander, and who is also the voice of Mr. Krabs on SpongeBob. Don't know if you all knew that. So every time you say, and if you're watching SpongeBob with your kids, like that's the Kurgan. Yeah. Where's the safety pins on his neck?
Now you're making me look at the movie in a different way as well too. So it's like
I'm good at that.
I don't we're talking about movies. That's interesting. There's some characters you look at though. In some movies, I had never thought about that, but there are definitely some characters in movies that you automatically think who they are. Like James Gandolfini, like he's always Tony Soprano, right? Which is good and bad, but there's some.
Tony ends up being Papa Smurf sometime, right?
But I think Ashton Kutcher, you always think of the '70s show, right? Like
absolutely, and Punk'd to a degree.
Punk'd was good, though.
Punk'd was good.
Punk'd was
Prank
good.
shows are always good.
I didn't know we'd be rating movies. This is a new.
That's all right. Well, it's like as soon as you posted it, Jason, like I got a folder of Coast Guard memes. Like that's great because you know what does. You gotta make fun of yourself. You really do. I mean, being a Coast Guard guy and a lawyer, I always make sure I keep plenty of Coast Guard jokes on hand and lawyer jokes on hand. Like I met you, I'm like, this dude's tall enough for one of our deep sea vessels, man. You're like 8 feet tall.
But there's great things to make fun of me. He is in the Coast Guard and a lawyer. We're going to get to that too.
Sure.
A lot of jokes you can make. But no, you did say something about the Coast Guard, which I think is more realistic. It is the branch where you deal with the American public pretty regularly, way more often than the other branches were. If you're with the missions they have, which is kind of interesting. I mean, you're definitely. You're more probably apt to be a U.S. citizen to have dealt with the Coast Guard, and while they're performing their mission or making sure you're not smuggling cocaine from South America or whatever. But you guys have the good video lately of those guys the
Alto Subarco
jumping on the sub. That was
it's funny. I tagged Coast Guard memes, but they sell swag, and I joke that I'm the unofficial staff judge advocate for Coast Guard memes. I know one of the admins, but they have a Alto Subarco T-shirt. So any blue T-shirt they sell, because theoretically you can wear it under our uniform. So I'm drilling this weekend. There's good odds I will have the Alto Subarco T-shirt on under my ODUs.
He can't tell he's a lawyer, but they're paying him. But he's smart enough not to say that.
No, it's interesting too and we're under Department of Homeland Security. So I joke that we're DHS's easy button. You guys. A lot of you big guys have been in combat arms, and I'm a reservist. So most of the time, if I'm going on any kind of mobilization, I personally won't use the word deployment until I actually go overseas. Then I'll call it deployment. Otherwise, I call it a mobilization. When I was on active duty in 10, I spent 30 days at the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. The last big event for a lot of coasties then was at Katrina, which was one of those events that kind of put us into the public face, and our Commandant, Admiral Allen. So I did about a month Deepwater Horizon, but after I went off active duty, 2021, I spent a month doing planning operations for a COVID vaccine site in Detroit. And then last year I did 2 months of Operation Allies Welcome. And that's when we were bringing in the Afghan refugees. And this is one of those things where I will offer Michael Walker's opinion and give the legal, anything said here is the opinions of Michael Walker, not the opinions of the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, the Commandant of the Coast Guard. When we just pretty much abandoned Afghanistan.
Yeah, and we're
got these guys there.
Yeah, I don't know if you caught it. We had a guest that was on. I don't know what episode he was, but Matt Dreisbach. And what's exciting is if you haven't seen it, he talked about rescuing or the whole process of getting his interpreter when he was over there into the United States. He's here, and he's going to be joining us here in a few more weeks later in the year. And it was really exciting because we were trying to get this. When I first brought it up, he was like, it's still kind of touchy because in his family they're still getting harassed over in Afghanistan. And then finally Matt was like, he wants to do it, Fawad. And it was funny. We were talking in DM chat, and then he finally said, "Hey, can you call me tonight?" We booked it, and I hope he's listening tonight. But he was like, "I'm so excited! Thanks for having me." I was like, "Dude, he's my brother. Like he fought alongside with us.
Absolutely,
they fought alongside with us. So many of them for so long." And I'm like,
well,
"Dude, it's my privilege to have him on." So we're looking. That's gonna be a really really fun episode here. I can't remember what date it is.
and you know this from your time there, and I'm sure the other guys too. But so the first month, we had people coming in, and they were at different military bases. So like Fort Dix, Fort McCoy, different locations. And then we ended up, when we had the last couple thousand, they went through Leesburg, Virginia. And the second month of that mobilization, I just kind of helped set up that facility. We had, I forgot what DOD called them. They were like cultural advisors, but they were interpreters, but they also knew, they were the ones that I would say, "Hey, so do not leave my side." And so I could, I could try to talk with folks that were coming in. And I think a lot of misconception, there's always misconceptions about other parts of the world. And sometimes that's an American thing, but you mentioned
a lot of the time it's an American
thing.
thing.
Yeah. But we had investigative journalists, we had medical professionals. At Fort Dix, we had an entire Afghan air wing. I met a guy, had tea with a guy who fought the freaking Russians when he was in Afghanistan. And he tells us, "You're treating us better than the president." So I'm thinking, regardless of my opinion on how we did well or did not do well with the pullout of Afghanistan, it's good to know that we're showing this kind of respect and trying to keep our promise to folks who really did put life and their families' lives on the line to help us.
No, 100%. I think that's when Matt talked about it, he was in the organization. He was working to get that back, and we'll talk about it here in a few more weeks. But it is crazy.
Just let me know if I'm jumping ahead.
No, not at all. This is how it's supposed to be. It's like, and it's more exciting as we get along. As episode 27, what's more exciting is like, Mike and I have talked a lot on the phone and through DM, but this is the first time we met, so it's always fun to meet someone. And that's what's exciting about this.
You should have heard the sigh that he made when he saw me. He's like,
"No, okay." He had the Coast Guard stuff on. He's like,
"This is the guy."
I thought it was going to be Ashton Kutcher coming in here. No, the Coast Guard guy. No, we're kidding. But no, just to we're moving along. There's no set. We're kind of. It's not like Jason's on anymore, and I'm keeping pretty regulated, and we've done in 15 minutes, but we try to be a little bit more lax now since we've moved along. But what's interesting about Mike is we're big into bourbon, and this gentleman is a Kentucky guy, born in Kentucky.
Yes, sir.
Grew up in Catawba,
you got
Catawba.
That's Western Kentucky. Yeah.
I got a Kentucky kid. I got a Louisville kid. My youngest was born in Louisville.
There you
go. As I was getting out of the Army and stationed at Fort Knox. Had no idea where it was. He actually told me where it was, which is 2 hours west of Louisville.
So you know where Paducah is.
Nobody goes that way.
Here's the thing: if you know where Campbell is, you go by 24. You're going to hit Catawba. It's about so. I always measured by the old days when I was a kid, and the speed limit was 55. It's about an hour and 25 minutes, but now it's probably 45, 50 minutes from Campbell. So
the Kentucky speed limit is opened up a little bit, and they let you roll.
Yeah.
And so what's interesting, we grew up on a working farm.
I did.
Hog, cattle, corn, tobacco, the whole deal, huh?
Absolutely.
So no desire to stay on the farm?
Obviously, there's part of me. So it's funny, and we'll get to talking. And I kind of like one of the running themes of my life is just being prepared for the future. So my dad, huge message me like, "Do I have any hobbies?" I'm like, I'm kind of a boring guy.
He called himself a nerd too.
I am a nerd. I'm definitely a boring guy. But like my dad was one of these guys. He didn't golf or anything like that, but we did contract bush hogging. So we'd cut grass for folks in their fields, and we would do hay baling. So it was a few years ago. Got a call from my mom, and the short of it was Dad was loading hay bales on his trailer. We haven't talked about this. And he got the first row of these round hay bales are about 5-6 feet tall. And they were putting on the second round. The strap broke. Dad fell about 8 feet. He landed like this, had a spinal injury. They flew him to Evansville. There's a hospital there, St. Elizabeth's, which is all ICUs. They're like all ICUs. He's about a quadriplegic for a month, and he's not back to 100%. But you ask about want to be around the farm. There are times now that I'm like, I wish I was down there more. I really do. And he's doing good. My mom is an uncanonized saint, and she takes care of him. And I do wish I was at the farm a lot more. And my wife, who is definitely my rock, she loves the farm too. She loves going to Kentucky. Maybe we'll end up down there at some point in some fashion.
Yeah, because my dad actually, through his life, ended up being raised on a farm for a little bit of his life, and that was one of the things I always ask him about going back. And he doesn't reminisce anything nicely. Like he's like, absolutely not. We actually talked one time about it was his foster parents, whether we could go and like stay on the farm, and he was like, "You're not going to make it on the farm." I felt like that was. It's dangerous. At the farm's dangerous.
It is dangerous, and I think it depends too. But you learn a lot of life lessons that you don't realize you're learning the lesson until afterward. We raised tobacco, and back in the day, a lot of farmers, they would get extra money off of raising tobacco. You had what was called a base. You could raise and sell so many pounds. That system is gone. The price support system, and that's a whole nother story for another day. But we would raise anywhere from 3 to 5 acres, and there were some parts I loved, there's some parts I hated. When I was in middle school, I'd get a bunch of my buddies, and Dad would pay them. And, it was good work. You learned a good work ethic. You learned some things you just got to suck up and deal with it. If I wasn't doing that, I was either bush hogging or helping Dad on the farm. The first job, I was feeding the hogs. There's a lot that you can learn on the farm, just in terms of work ethic. That I think the military, if anything, comes equal to it is the discipline and the training and the camaraderie that you get through being in the military.
Yeah, and there's all those jobs. I think it's the same thing. Like it's not the same, but like one of the jobs I had, I was a paper boy.
Same thing.
Like getting up super early in the morning, delivering these, and it was at the time like it's the worst job I ever had. But it was actually not that bad of a job. But you're getting up every day at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Sure.
Rain, snow, whatever, doing this, delivering the newspaper. For all the people now, it's a newspaper, like a physical newspaper. A lot of people don't remember that. But,
rolled up.
Yeah, the young guys in here, they're like, "What? You get your newspaper delivered to your house? Yeah, like rolled
up. Like in that old movie, Better Off Dead. $2
on your bike and attacked by dogs. You learned a lot about it. But that's I can see that. That's like, but there's a lot of that's the thing. With jobs nowadays, like my kids are pretty spoiled. They don't, one of them's. I don't think any of them have like hardcore jobs where they were really, working.
I mean, even
like getting grit, they worked at, like, I guess if you're a cashier at Kroger, like making pizzas,
Yeah, if you're making pizzas or doing stocking or something like that. I worked in a grocery for a little bit, and they have what's called facing. So all you do is you go through the aisles and you pull all the stuff to the edge of the to the shelf so everybody get it. I mean, you learn a lot. I mean, even the military is having a hard time. I mean, every service. I know just in the Coast Guard, I'm sure it's the same in all the other services. And anybody else is here is still in, like Jason or whatnot, can Roger up. I've never seen so many messages hit about force shaping to either get people in or keep people in.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's a
great career.
Yeah, but
a great career.
But there's a lot of things that go into it. We try not to get super political, and we're not trying to get political here. But there's some things
trying to get political. There's some things that people to join.
No, but there's some things that have changed. I think there's a shuffle of what that job is. Like like I absolutely say, like, if you don't know what you're doing in your life, we've said this before, join the military, put in 4 years, see the world.
Get your GI bill.
Yeah, get your GI Bill, and you're going to walk out with a skill, and then you're going to have a free education to figure it out.
And if you don't use the GI Bill, you got like Voc Rehab. There's all kinds of resources.
There's all kinds of stuff now, especially with talk about today's economic world where, like, housing, you have your GI Bill for you have your VA benefits for homes and things like that. So it is interesting to see
we need electricians. We need HVAC people. I mean, the robots are going to take over at some point. But we need plumbers, and electricians, and HVAC people.
Flipping burgers, making fries. Everybody's not paying attention, but no, it is true. It is true. Yeah, pitas, flip. Spanakopita, yeah.
Baklava. I don't know.
He's throwing up all the terms.
Appropriate shade.
Yeah, he's throwing all the terms.
And it's not shade because I'm in the presence of bourbon royalty.
It's but the funny thing is you just have it is an interesting time. That's one of the things that I was talking to somebody on Tuesday about a farm. Like, I feel like I go back in a farm now at my age and just like you're doing something, you're accomplishing something every day. There's something to be said about that. Yeah. And that's like any job. You got to like whatever you do. I'm 50. You're not far behind me.
46.
And I think it's just a different time where we didn't have that luxury. I look at my kids.
I'm so
and
boring. I listen to on like Sunday morning, like the 8 o'clock retirement show on news radio. I listen to that.
You're up that early?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Or I'm listening to it. I've been doing retirement planning. Like that's just kind of the spot I'm at.
He's up at 8 listening, taking notes.
On the old man shows right after the garden show. So
I thought you were going to talk about the truck swap or like the old,
I'll listen to those too. So my reserve unit's in St. Louis, and on Sunday mornings they actually have what's called they call it like the yard sale show, and literally somebody will call in and say, "I've got a 1985 RCA TV for $250," and they've got it. It's very regimented, and they've been doing it for about 20 years. And I'm driving in drill one day, and I said, "This is the most fascinating thing I've heard in a while." That's how boring I am, but I own it.
I watched that. There's a Netflix special where they do that.
Yeah,
like I think that's cool. It's like the swap, whatever, something swap. I mean, people are going in there. I'm all about that. That's cool. But so Kentucky guy, you grew up on the farm, so you kind of break free. You go to arguably the better. If you're not from Kentucky, there's it's like we're in Ohio now. This is like Ohio, Michigan, but in Kentucky they have their own schools that they go. The UK, University of Kentucky, and then
So I want to negotiate the claim wars here. Yeah, I went to UK. UK, like Ohio State, is the land grant university, which historically means back in the 1800s, you had the federal government give a lot of land and money to certain universities. And part of the deal was they had to teach agriculture. So OSU is like that, so is UK. They're the land grant university. And there's also a separate land grant program, which are kind of equivalents of like historically Black colleges and universities. So in Kentucky, be Kentucky State. I don't know what the Ohio equivalent is, but anyway, I was a 4-H kid. I play sports and stuff, but I'd also do like competitive public speaking from 3rd grade on. And 4-H led it. Yeah, see, Jason's like, I can't hold this anymore. I can't hold this anymore.
Jason has been so quiet for
I know.
I'm
waiting.
Episodes
I wish he'd throw in. I'm like, I want to see these memes. See, I probably have all the ones he already has, and probably shared them. But I did that, and then I do, like you have your county fair. Like I've had the tobacco plan or this and that. Didn't do the animals because it was too much work. I mean, showing animals is too much work. I'm like, I want to get work done. But I did 4-H and did FFA, and that's what led me to go to UK. I actually went through the College of Agriculture. And for those of you who are parents, look at your colleges of agriculture at OSU or UK or whatever. They've probably got a degree that's equivalent to what your kid wants. If they want to be an accountant, like is Josh the accountant? I can't remember.
He's got all you guys.
They'll have an agribusiness degree.
He knows all your guys, everything about you guys. He's been here for an hour and he's got them all pegged.
There you go. They'll have an agribusiness degree. So you got to take a few agriculture courses, but usually the ag college have pretty good scholarship endowments. So I did that. I was a state 4-H officer. I had green jacket. I kind of looked like somebody won the Masters or something. And FFA with the corduroy jackets. But yeah, I went to UK.
And you graduated in 2000 with the agriculture degree, right?
Uh-huh.
So, but you said something that's funny. Everyone's different. That's why I love why I started this is how different people are. And you said you did the public speaking, which is interesting because I think nowadays one of the biggest challenges I see is people can't talk to other people. They can't
because
getting on camera like this is freaking people out, or just even talking.
They're
to
talking
people.
Like this. I'm looking at you. I'm like, hey, Jay, how are you doing?
Yeah.
How does my sweatshirt look?
It's kind of like Genty over there right now. He's wow, yeah. But no, it is. But I mean, you said that was funny, but I think that's a skill that I think has dropped off. They just people aren't communicating. It's a huge thing to be able to communicate.
But you know what's a good place to teach public speaking? Military.
Oh, look,
he's first sergeant.
I feel like he
knows how to communicate.
I feel like he's recruiting hard over here. He's like, not Jason.
He knows
how to. His stomach is full. He's had a little bit of
sergeant. He knows how to communicate with command.
We don't want him. Yeah, he's going to communicate a different way that. It's a good way. I like it. It's a very responsive way.
So I told you I wouldn't tell in-depth sea stories, but like we had so before you bring somebody potentially before a general court martial, which is kind of like felony charges in the military world, you have what's called an Article 32 hearing. And I remember we had a case where they're not defendants at that point, and I don't know if you call them accused at that point either, but we had maybe a dozen people all in the same room, and we were doing a hearing for all of them. And,
suspects,
subjects. We'll just say subjects. And so, I'm government counsel. I'm not trial counsel yet. That's what your prosecutor is. I'm not sure. I'm kind of out of practice from it. But every time I'd have somebody on the phone, I'd be like, make sure you speak with a command voice. And then they would always kind of bust my balls. Be like, command voice. Because, you learn it from training. You're like, if I say the word I hear from training, I'll sound cool and legitimate, which is actually the opposite.
Yeah, we definitely don't want first sergeant.
But good communications.
No, communication is important. It is a big thing. It is funny and it's getting harder and harder, like you said, with technology and the way all the things that are built to not have that interpersonal communication.
Am I taking you too far off track?
No, not at all.
Rope me back, man.
No, not at all. Hey, Jackie, I'm gonna get you back in now. So we're back to 2000, right? Graduating from UK agriculture degree. Mm-hmm. One of the questions at that point, did you know you want to be a lawyer? When did you know you want to be a lawyer?
So I knew I wanted to be a lawyer senior year of high school. I did a mock trial team, and I had two really good coaches. One was we call him the Commonwealth attorney, Kentucky's prosecutor. Another one he was a defense attorney, but he was kind of like back in the day, and you don't even see as much of these anymore, like the guy who did every kind of legal practice, did criminal defense and everything. His name's John Pancake, and I loved him to death. I just remember I went to a practice, and the person who did the opening statements for the case, she wasn't showing up. So I just went to the coaches. I said, you know what? They're not showing up. I'd be interested. And John's like, all right, give me an opening statement tomorrow for both sides. So I did it. Mock trial was the best experience I had in my life. We made it to state. I had 4-H commitment, so I had to bow out of state.
Green jacket.
So, the green jacket responsibilities, but, learning that sometimes you have to prioritize and honor commitments.
Right.
And then maybe as a month out, I graduated high school, John passed away. I had the idea I was going to come back home and work with him. I had that. That's kind of what I wanted to do. And then undergrad was, I had a communications degree. I don't really want to do this broadcasting crap. I took some classes. Wasn't so impressed with it. I did what was basically our equivalent of a government major. I was supposed to graduate in 99, but I pushed a year off because I worked at the Farm Bureau. And everybody probably knows Farm Bureau from their insurance, but they also have their lobbyists for farmers. And so I worked with them. And I thought, I maybe want to do something like this. So I knew I wanted to be a lawyer when I went into law school. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do as in terms of practicing.
Right, and you're one of the few lawyers that I met that actually have it wasn't like a pre-law. You did something.
I think the pre-law is the worst degree ever. I mean, I'm listening.
What I love about my
the unsolicited advice for the parents of soon-to-be college.
Don't talk to the parents. Talk to the kids.
And the kids.
It's a bad idea.
Parents. And Josh will appreciate this. Get an accounting degree or get you a degree that will get you a professional license like engineering. If you want to do all the other crap, make it a minor. Don't do a pre-law degree.
Man, we're getting farming
advice.
Though it's
interesting enough, some law schools, they have a program now where you can do your undergrad, but you can start law school early on in your undergrad, like in the old days, because I don't mind offering my opinion. I think the whole law enterprise of doing 3 years of school and taking a bar exam is a freaking scam. Yeah. Lincoln read law, man. And he became a lawyer reading law. States used to allow that stuff.
So did the guy from what is he? Catch Me If You Can?
Yeah.
Didn't he pass the bar?
Yeah, I think he did.
Yeah, he studied, and that's a legitimate thing.
That's not the most popular meme. The best one is a meme of him from Django Unchained.
Yeah, that's true. But he has, but that's a true story. But it is interesting. Like, I thought that was funny when you learn stuff about people. It's like you normally it's that your undergraduate is driving you towards the degree, or you're trying to do something very similar like pre-law or you hear that a lot of times.
Honestly,
like
kids, if you don't know what you want to do, don't just go to a 4-year school to go to. You're running your parents bankrupt. You're supposed to take the money after they give you the inheritance after it's passed. Don't take it now. You're spending the money on the boring stuff. You want to spend the money on the fun stuff.
We're getting all kinds of advice here. It's we're gonna.
We'll get back to talking about my career. So, but I'll try to drive.
No, but so now you want to be a lawyer. what clicked in you to join the military? Like I usually start with this question really fast.
No, it's good.
This
is all leading up to it. So it's a sequence of events. So my first year, after my first semester, I went on academic probation. I did not know how to take law school exams. And law school is basically a whole semester of lecture and one exam at the end. That's it. That's it. And either you do well on it or you choke. Which I do like to think that when I would talk to one of our professors, I'm like, yeah, you gave me a D. And he looks at me, he's like, you're shitting me. I'm like, no. So at least, but it's an anonymous exam. So they didn't realize that this very affable fellow from Western Kentucky was an idiot. Academic probation my first semester. And University of Kentucky, Rosenberg College of Law now, gave me a third-year student to kind of tutor me. And I made it. And then I made it on Law Journal. And the way law school works is your first semester grade really, in large part, determines your future. If you're top 10 your first semester, the big law firms, the ones that you can maybe make 20, 30 grand in a summer working for them, you're going to be the one that they're looking at to hire. If you're like me, who was in the bottom quarter of the class, you're going to figure out whatever.
So you need to go back to the farm.
Yeah, pretty much. But I was working for a judge back home. And I worked for him after my senior year at college. My granddad was county historian, and he was friends with the judge. And I interviewed and I got the job. And we had the state penitentiary where I grew up too. So, we get petitions out of the prison, like habeas corpus petitions, which are pretty much, the power went out one day in the winter and I was cold and my civil rights were violated. They need to go to boot camp or officer school. Or deploy. But, I was looking for jobs. And after my second year, I found a law firm in Paducah, Kentucky that represented towboat companies, did maritime law. And the interesting point of history is Admiralty and maritime law, a lot of the principles in that body of law today still predate the Constitution completely. It's a really interesting area. So I worked with this firm for a summer. And then after my third year, I got a job offer with them. I worked with them for a couple of years. But while I was waiting on job offers, again, if you're a law student, they'll have these career fairs and they'll have kind of like the firm interviews for the people who are really good in the class. And then the scrubs like me, well, the government agencies will talk to everybody. So I met with the Coast Guard recruiter. I was down in Atlanta and she's like, I don't say this that often, but you're exactly kind of the recruit we're looking for. I was like, oh, this is interesting. So I looked into it. I'd had a medical issue at that point. I was engaged and I had a job offer. So this was 2003, 4. So I held off, took the firm job. I worked at this maritime firm, Admiralty firm, representing towboat companies for about a year and a half. Then I transitioned to working for a firm, which was one of the firms that would advertise on TV, but this is why I wanted to meet Chad, because he does family law. I did divorce and family law work for a while. And then for about a year, this would have been in 2008, I helped out a guy who was kind of getting back on his feet in his legal practice, helping him out. But I applied to commission with the Coast Guard, and I got in through what's called the direct commission program. So it was really just that being in the Admiralty law area, right, and seeing kind of the connection with the Coast Guard. I think this was interesting. And like I told First Sergeant, I did go meet with the Kentucky National Guard recruiter. That was the only other one I did. Right. So,
and in the direct commissioning, it's like I think it's probably similar to the other branches. It's that's for specialties. Doctors, lawyers, yes, exactly, chaplains, things like that. All the branches have that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely that you made it. You could have went to the Army. We have lawyers in the Army, but it's okay.
You have one of the best JAG schools. So
it's okay. We won't. We don't hate you about it. You're still a vet. Right. We love you.
We're kind of like comms officers. You can talk about us, but you can't talk without us.
Right. So you become like you said, you got commissioned the Coast Guard in 2009.
Yep.
Through the direct commissioning program, graduated from all the schools.
Yep.
The direct commissioning officer school in New London. Then your basic law officer course, Newport, Rhode Island, in 2010. And then you were on active duty initially, correct?
09 to 17.
Okay. Yeah, so,
which, by the way, Newport's a great place to be spending 10 weeks. I don't know if you all have been to Newport. It's a really cool city.
Yeah, it's a nice area.
And then, direct commission school was 10 days of NDOC. So they would bunk us with our officer candidate school, or OTS, or whatever your also equivalent is at the Coast Guard Academy. But it's during the summer, so the cadet, well, they've got a separate wing from the cadets for the officer candidates and the officer trainee. So it's called an officer trainee. So I spent 10 days, and they had me bunked with the guy who was prior enlisted. So that's the 10 days that they teach you marching in close order drill, and they just, yell. It was my favorite part, because then it was followed by 5 weeks of, death by PowerPoint, which they call fork and knife school.
So I'm a Norwich grad. So Coast Guard Academy is our like arch rival. So it's one of the funny things. So it's funny when I was thinking about that today. I'm like, this is
but
so funny.
But do you all both go to Connecticut College to find dates?
Never, no
okay.
Way I did.
I just want to find out.
I mean, somebody probably went there, but I don't know. But it was. This is years ago. What the funny thing about that was our huge. Like our rivals, so the Army, Navy, Norwich, the Coast Guard Academy. So this is like us stealing
Beat the Bears
flags and doing all kind of stuff. So it's always fun. The Coast Guard it has a little bit more. For me, it has a little bit more from growing, from my time.
I forgot you were Norwich grad.
It's like it's huge. Like the Coast Guard Academies are like, and we've been kicking the shit out of you the past few years in football finally. So it's all good.
I went to UK. I don't know that there's any sports outside of UK basketball, so I didn't know you all had sports.
I mean, I found out this week though, I didn't know how bad Louisville was doing. Like they only won 4 games, so there's no more rivalry in Kentucky.
I don't know. It's just
Patino leaves. And
I feel bad for Louisville, because it's like after Hookergate, which listen. I'm a UK grad, but I'm like, hey, you got people in North Carolina who are freaking gun decking their exams and cheating outright, but yet you don't do anything to them, but then you pull the championship from Louisville.
Yeah.
Is what it is.
Well, I lived in Knox, so it was always funny.
Sure.
And I had no love of UK or Louisville. Yeah. It's the same thing here. Like I would buy, I'd buy if I went to the, to buy a pair of shorts and there was a Michigan shorts for like, $4, I'd buy them.
$4,
like it doesn't matter. Yeah, but and I remember we were down in Lexington on Tuesday, and I was telling somebody when I was getting out of the Army, I had a pair of these Louisville shorts, and I was in Lexington. And this guy is like, dude, we don't do that here. I'm like, what are you talking about? The guy's he's freaking out about these shorts. It's like, I got them for $3.99 from like Sports Authority. Like, what's the big deal? Like, but yeah, there's a huge, but it's the same thing as Ohio, Michigan here. There's a huge rivalry, which is always fun down there. But yeah, when everyone's playing well, it's more fun. But I didn't realize, I don't live there anymore, so I don't really follow. And I'm not a college basketball fan, but I didn't realize how shitty Louisville is now. So it is what it is.
Well, it's funny because like Kentucky Sports Radio posted a story about how a lot of UK fans have stopped watching games. And look, Calipari is one of these guys. He brings them in before they graduate high school, and when they graduate high school, he gets his year or two out of them, and he moves on.
Yeah,
that's his style. That's what you all paid for. That's what you gave him the multi-year, multi-million-dollar contract. So my first thing is, you guys are always expecting Adolph Rupp to bring a championship every year. Come live in Cleveland. I've married into a long-suffering Cleveland Browns family. All right, come to Cleveland.
You'll know what sorrow is.
10 years with us, and then we'll see how much you bitch about stuff.
And we found out. We just recently found out this week, though, that the Kentucky coach has his own bourbon line.
Did
you know that?
I didn't know that.
I didn't. I thought you were going to bust that out on us, but
no, I didn't know. That's
the UK coach,
bigger in Bradshaw.
Yeah, it's like a second batch or whatever. We saw that when we were down in Downkentucky on Tuesday. We'll research more about it. But we'll go into like why we're here. Like he brought it. We brought some unique whiskeys. We'll get into the second whiskey. We sold out today, and we'll tell you why. What I mean is, we were down in Kentucky early in the week, so we're going to honor a couple things. But Mike is a Kentucky guy, so he brought us one that we haven't talked about yet, which is always fun. One of the exciting things is to ask people what the whiskey's going to bring. They're going to bring in or bourbons, and it's always fun because people are so different. That's what I love about whiskey.
I want to jump back real quick on the point of whiskey. So when most people go through college, their undergrad year is kind of their wild year, and then they tone down in graduate school and law school. I kind of went in the opposite direction. I didn't really drink much in undergrad. And in grad school, I started to, but back in my day, so 2001 through 2004, I mean, Woodford was the expensive stuff.
Yeah.
Nobody bought Blanton's. Nobody bought Pappy. Nobody bought any of this. If you heard that Jimmy Russell was coming to the store, nobody would show up.
Yeah.
And then, so in 2002, after my first year at law school, I went to Liquor Barn in Harrodsburg Road in Lexington. I bought a bottle of Pappy 20 for it was either $80 or $100.
Yeah.
Dude, I mean,
people don't believe these stories. If you're new to whiskey,
true.
It's 100% true.
And my buddy and I, when the semester was over, and we drank the thing.
Yeah.
I mean, y'all hadn't seen my old haircut. There's a couple of things now me went to talk to then me, be like, stop the reverse mullet haircut. It don't look cool.
And don't drink that Pappy that you bought.
And buy all that Pappy you can because you're gonna thank me one day.
Yeah, my son's always talking about that. If you could go back in time and all that kind of stuff, and one was like, and I would have bought all that stuff.
But also think about it: 2001 Pappy. When was it put in the barrel?
Yeah.
If it's 20 years, when was it put in the barrel?
It's old school. It's the original.
81. So it's probably Stutzel-Weller.
Yeah, it's old school.
And I was too young and stupid then to appreciate what it really was.
Yeah, but it was enjoyable. You drank it, and that's what it's supposed to be. And that's one of the things we talk about whiskey.
We had the Maker's Gold label. You don't remember the Maker's Mark had the gold wax on it? Anybody?
I don't remember that, yeah.
There used to be Maker's Gold had a gold. Yeah.
I don't remember that. Was that the lower proof one or no?
I can't remember.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, that's before my. But as you'll see as we'll talk, like Mike is a huge bourbon nerd like we are, which is exciting. But he brought us a new one today. We'll talk about our first featured whiskey of the day, which is MB Roland. This will be like the second time I've had MB Roland. The first time I had it wasn't the greatest experience, so I'm keeping it open-minded here.
This one yet?
Not yet. I'm excited.
It's very polarizing.
It is very different.
It sells out.
Yeah, no, it is different, and it's different than and one of the fun things is I like to be like I know everything about whiskey and I don't, but it's always fun to get a new brand where you get to learn about it. But MB Roland is located in Pembroke, Kentucky. It's actually known as being a grain to glass Kentucky craft distillery. It was founded in 2009 by a couple, Paul and Mary Beth MB Tomaszewski. I don't know if I pronounced it. I probably didn't.
Sure.
And it's actually located on an old Amish farm.
Do you remember Paul's background, right?
I don't know that. No.
Army dude.
Oh, that's right. I did
read
that. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Yeah,
from
Fort Campbell. Yeah, it was a Campbell. He's the one at first. I remember reading that yesterday.
Yeah.
And MB Roland has a lot of different products, like many craft distilleries do. They have their barrel aged Kentucky bourbons. They have some seasoned and limited availability whiskeys, which I would probably categorize this in. They do a bunch of all natural flavored moonshines. Its products are distributed in 14 states as well as 2 countries, the United States and UK right now.
They ship to exchanges, military guys.
Yeah.
They ship to exchanges.
Yeah. And then what we're having tonight is a little bit different than the product I've had before. This is actually the MB Roland Dark Fired Kentucky Straight Bourbon. And what they do is they use this is kind of one of the different mash bills that we've ever talked about here before, but they use a large amount of a fired corn as a flavoring grain. And the company states that this is the reason they get this really different smoky bourbon that nobody else does. But tonight we're going to have a private barrel pick from Westport Whiskey and Wine. This is aged 2 years, so it's a young bourbon, but it's 113.6 proof. And like I said, this mash bill is a little bit different than what we've ever seen. It's a 45% white corn, 33% dark fired corn, 17% rye, and then a 5% malted barley.
So Pembroke is one of the biggest corn producers. And you all remember Neat? Remember that documentary when Marianne Eaves is talking to the front? I think she was in Pembroke area. And I'm interested what everybody else says about it before I have my pour because
sure.
Make sure some of the
guys these guys will grab it. Don't worry. They're a bunch of scavengers. Hand it to the right. Just hand it to the right of this up here.
I'm real time here to say, but
it'll find its way back.
So Pembroke's a big corn growing area, but it's also Kentucky is the #1 dark fired tobacco producer in the country, and so you're talking about stuff that goes into like chewing tobacco and whatnot. Christian County, where Pembroke is one of the biggest dark fired producers. So when you are dark firing tobacco, you're either air curing or dark firing. Dark firing, you're basically sitting like a sawdust fire in the bottom of the barn, and that smoke is curing the tobacco as opposed to air curing it.
This is different.
They do it. So this
I'm watching some people.
Smoking. So
he's talking.
They have a little shed, and they have kind of like like them screens at the archaeological digs where you shake it out like, holy shit, golden bones. Yeah. They put the corn in that and they smoke it. And so that's where you get this. I love it. Everybody makes fun of me for it, but they always sell out.
No, I will tell you about what's interesting about watching the guys take a hit of it. It's a different. Yeah, it's definitely different.
What are you guys getting on the nose? I want to hear this because I have my own thoughts, and it goes into a whole different. Scotch, so good. So red thing Scotchy. You're getting.
There's a pipe tobacco.
I like
Old Dark Fire.
Yeah,
and I can't remember who makes it, but that's the first thing I thought of was a dark fired pipe tobacco.
Yeah. What else?
I mean,
Pro?
I honestly, for me,
Corn.
we talked this before. It hits you hard corn, whether it's like white corn, dark. I get a ton of corn.
I get, and
which-
I've always gotten country ham smell from it.
Oh shit! Look at country.
But this goes.
Everybody's like,
yeah.
I'm too full to think of food right now, right? But it's definitely super unique. I would give you that. It's
And
a
I'll
different. It's
What
definitely
about
different.
the taste?
What pipe tobacco smells.
Yeah.
I think.
I definitely taste the country ham in it. But this goes to the whole thing. When I was doing my pod, I always wanted to get some scientist that was really smart and smelling stuff. Remember like that second Silence of the Lambs where she goes to with the envelope and they're all like, this came from so-and-so. It'll be a short list. I kind of, that's an interesting comment. Who knows what they're saying?
But one thing, Mike, that we haven't talked about is like Mike actually has a super whiskey focus, or used to have a whiskey focused podcast, right?
Yeah, the People's Proof, and I've got episodes I still have to load. I'm going to call them lost episodes. I've gotten kind of this point in my life. It's family, civilian job, reserve work, and then everything else if I got time for it, kind of thing.
Yeah, we talked about maybe
it was fun pod doing. I wanted to collab with you, and this is just as good as. This is being better. This is
great. It's fun. Like if you can check it out, and we'll post that in there for you later in the page. But he's one of us. He's a whiskey nerd and doing that. But this is interesting. It does. I get the corn. Like I feel like we were talking about this driving down to Kentucky is like, and we'll talk about whiskey. We talk a little bit about whiskey, or sometimes a lot about whiskey. But any of the single grain or heavy grain things, the high grain stuff, I'm not a huge fan of, like, especially corn, because, like I used to love mellow corn when I was young because it was cheap. Sure. And then now if I get mellow corn, I'm like, wow, like, it's like,
why did I buy this?
Yeah. Like, I mean, and a couple weeks ago we had Hudson Baby Bourbon, which is 100% corn, but right off the nose, I do get the corn. But how they're doing it
needs some time though,
but it would be interesting if they did age it longer.
And they're getting there. So they released their first bond, did like Barker Hill Farm. I got 2 bottles. I ordered it. I called them and ordered it when I was on my mobilization last year. So I picked it up. My buddy's back home holding it. But they finished their new rick house. It's like a lot of other distilleries, smaller distilleries, give it time.
Yeah.
It's like everything else. And I like that they're doing their own stuff. I get it. It's easy to call MGP and get a portfolio set up. But it's good that they're doing it, and I like this take because, I mean, you guys know, bourbon is just the quintessential drink that reflects American history, and the different parts of the country and how they put it together. If I had some J. Henry here, that's some very Wisconsin-y stuff, right? You got different spirits from different parts of the country. And what I do like about MB Roland, but particularly about Dark Fire, not just their military history, is that it connects to something that was a big part of the region.
Yeah.
A huge part of the region.
Yeah. And they are known for that area. And the thing is, for me, it's way better than the normal MB Roland I've had before, which is a private barrel of something else. But this is like, it definitely has a unique taste. And if you are a cigar smoker, I think this would be like a super thing to pair with it. It is good. I mean, it's just to me, like, and somebody said before, it's like a little scotchy.
What do the rest of the guys think?
Yeah,
I don't think it's scotchy.
I think
it's smoky. I think it's smoky. It's
but anything goes smoky, I automatically go the peaty. I get too it. I just like cringe.
It ain't like Lafroig.
No, hell no. I can. I
do love Lafroig.
If I get that on my skin, I get
Lafroig in the biggest wine glass possible. So there's just this cyclone of dirty smelling peat.
But it does like as I'm sitting here, it does literally linger on your.
It does.
It does stay there. So it does at a certain point for me. I get if you're like.
It's a very polarizing bottle.
It definitely it's super unique. So if you're out there, you get a chance to get it, I would definitely try it. It's definitely worth it. And if you're a cigar smoker, I would tell you right now to get it and see what it's like.
Me, like country ham, you're gonna like this.
Actually,
everybody makes fun of my palate, man. I like crazy stuff.
The country ham,
possum gut finish bourbon. If they give it to me. Like a plate of mountain oysters.
There we go. Mountain.
Calf
so now what's interesting, we talked. So you were active duty from 2009 to
June
2017 or 18.
Yes, sir.
17. So long time. I mean, in total time now, like I said before, now you're 14 years into your career, right?
Right about. Yeah.
Right, about that a little bit around there. So
Yeah.
various jobs. As he's been talking about, Mike is a lawyer. If you haven't figured that out, done some interesting stuff. Your first active duty job was in Norfolk.
Yep.
It's a trial counselor.
Mm-hmm.
So prosecutor or
Trial
defense?
counsel is what you call prosecutors.
Okay.
And so for Coast Guard, all of us, the Navy, the Marine Corps, the Coast Guard, all go to Naval Justice School. When we go to our units, we're not big enough. We don't have a corps. So in the Army, you guys have a JAG Corps, Air Force, JAG Corps, Navy, JAG Corps, meaning it is a core of a specific MOS, if you will, that they're all competing with and promoting within that realm. I'm technically a line officer. So like a Marine would be an equivalent. The Marines are the same ways. We're all line officers. I might have a JAG designation, but I'm promoting and competing with, the cuttermen and all that.
Okay.
Oh yeah. And I mean,
so same as like a pilot, or
we're competing with everybody. And the joke always is like the Coast Guard, we got less people in the Coast Guard than the NYPD has personnel. That's how that used to be the joke. But we don't have enough to have our own defense counsel in terms of training and experience, because it's a volume game, right? People get in trouble, make mistakes. It's a volume game. In Norfolk, we would send some lawyers to work for what's called the Navy Defense Service Office now. So they go work with the Navy and they defend Navy cases, either at ADSET boards. What do y'all call it in the Army when you're kicking out somebody administratively? I forgot. I don't know. Not Article 15, but like when you're administrative.
Court martial or no?
Not a court martial, administratively processing them out. Like it's not a court martial, but it's like you. Yeah. You're first sergeant. You should know what this is called.
I don't know if we have a technical term. We're like kicking your ass in the curb.
Like somebody gets too many alcohol incidents, they're not getting court-martialed.
Chapter.
Okay. So then
Jay said it took him like we needed some hints. We're gonna figure it out. We're like chapter.
We call them.
I beat Jason by the way.
Navy and Coast Guard call them ADSET boards, where it's like chaptering. So we would represent them in that, or we'd represent. Accused, and we call them defendants, call them accused in courts martial. But I was a prosecutor, so my first job was coming in and being a trial counsel as actual prosecutor. So working up cases for investigation, working with our CJIS agents, and referring charges, and trying the case.
Yeah, so like for people out in the military, prosecutor, right? You're prosecuting people.
Yeah,
they're doing, which is
that was my first year and a half, 2 years. In Norfolk.
Enjoyable? What do you think of it? Like, because you have people like in the chapter. Okay. We're chapter people in the military. Some people you're chaptering. You're kind of like this shitbag needs to get out of the military.
Let's
other people that you're kind of like.
Let's pause on it. I'll tell you my opinion at the time, but I give a better answer if we talk about my full career. But at the time,
I thought you were going to say if you
at the time there were folks that they didn't need to just be kicked out. They needed to be prosecuted. And I'm talking things like sexual assault, massive drug, not just use, but things that it's not just a kind of a breakdown of good order and discipline. It's just you're doing something really bad and you need to face a punishment beyond just getting kicked out with a general discharge.
And I got to tell you, at the time when I joined the military, I didn't think that, there's a – sorry, my dad was in the military, and you don't realize – that it's just, it's a small, segment of society, and all these horrible things, all these horrible people still exist in that.
They do.
And it's kind of, it's even more, it's like, in society, when you see that, it's disappointing. But when you're in the military, it's even more disappointing when you're like, oh, I thought we're all the same. And you find out that people are doing this and you're like, oh my God. Like, so, it's a huge impact,
So exactly. And I got more to say, we'll work through career. So I did the year and a half of prosecuting. And then the unit at Legal Service Command, we were the only unit that had uniformed lawyers that did federal contracting law. And for those of you who are lawyers, it's a very niche area. If you know how to do federal contracting law, you can always find a job. So I did that for about a year and a half. And then I went over, and so I don't know how much you guys know about how Coast Guard's organized, but it's real quick. We got the commandant.
We don't know anything about it.
We got the commandant at the top. Draw a line through the Rocky Mountains. To the east, you've got the Atlantic area.
Everybody close your eyes as he tells us.
You go to the Atlantic area.
Okay.
And then that goes into Europe, and I don't know if it's Southeast Asia. If you go to the left, you got the Pacific area. Those are 3-star commands. and those are the two halves of the world. Within each area, you have what are called districts. So like on my back of my sweatshirt, my last active duty unit was the 9th district. That is the Great Lakes. D7, the 7th district, is the Gulf and parts of South America. It's based down in Miami. If you go to D8.
What's the Coast Guard doing on South America that far? Come on.
Well, it's a lot of Whitehall diplomacy. We do a lot of patrols. We have bilateral agreements with different foreign nations to do patrols and do support and stuff like that. Just on, even if you go on the raw military side, we do like ISR support, or we'd have Coast Guard units on Navy vessels. And you talk about tack-on shifts and stuff. They'd be a Navy vessel until it turned into an LA mission. Then it'd tack-on shift over to the Coast Guard admiral. But anyways, you got the districts, and then you have what are called sectors. So the nearest sector north of here is Sector Buffalo, but actually extends geographically into Cleveland. And then you got the small boat stations. You have marine safety units. So those are guys that do vessel inspections and stuff, and other different subunits. And then you have air stations. So that's generally how the Coast Guard is set up. Headquarters, area, sectors, or area, districts, sectors, air stations, and then marine safety units working for sectors. Got to be 6 foot tall. You dag them right. You can't wade back in if you're not that tall. And you got to have a good ASVAB score. But we've lowered it a little bit.
I think you have to do it, but
I don't know that for sure.
So you did some different stuff, lawyer stuff. Like, I think it's interesting. The one thing I have a question. So, like the Coast Guard Auxiliary.
Okay.
What is that exactly?
So Coast Guard Auxiliary.
Because my brother-in-law, my father-in-law, his son, my brother-in-law joined. What is the?
Somebody got blocked. Don't block them.
Oh no, they're getting blocked. So we're going to see this happen. Like, this is the first couple episodes. If you didn't, a couple weeks ago. There's people that like the term Patriot has got people all worked up, and we get some interesting comments. So that's what's going to block. We're not blocking anybody unless you're being complete
douche nozzle
D-bag. So it's like it's fine, whatever. But
you were asking about auxiliary. The auxiliary is kind of like the Civil Air Patrol. It is a civilian volunteer. But they wear uniforms and they support a mission. So Civil Air Patrol, they support Air Force-y type stuff. Auxiliary, they're a great bunch of people. They help mainly with boating safety and doing patrols. When you got high volume boating areas, they're really good to help with the wreck boaters. And they do a lot of good. And that's not giving them enough credit. You'll have some aux volunteers that will. They'll help at stations. They'll man the radio. We have one in Cleveland. I don't know if she's still in, but she's a freaking physician, and she would help do like separation physicals and annual health assessments and stuff. But she was also a really good cook. She would volunteer at the Admiral's house and cook stuff. Like, we got some really great auxiliarists. So.
That's an interesting part of the Coast Guard.
It's a good force multiplier for us. Yeah. So it's interesting enough. In War College, I did a paper on whether we could use them for actual intel missions.
Like
legally, like kind of like ISR stuff, could they observe areas and report back and stuff like that? Because in my mind, you had an older couple on a powerboat. That's a great asset to have, just kind of observe something and report back. But legally, it's a different issue. But it was worth. I mean, it made for a good paper. That's all you need is a good paper sometimes. I needed a grade.
After your first semester of law school, you're like, let's go for the grade.
I'll say this though, and I don't ever toot my horn too much about law school, but like another big thing in law school is to get on the Law Journal, which is an article of a bunch of boring ass articles it's a book of boring ass articles by law professors and other students. Every student has to write what's called a note. So it's about a 50-page paper. I wrote one on the principle of if I can ever vote off of my computer or my phone. This is 2003. You got these laws that say you can't put signs within so many feet of a polling place. Well, if I can vote off my phone, is that technically a polling place? And I ran with it and ended up getting cited by the Supreme Court in the Citizens United decision. I'll hold that up against any of my top 10s because none of them got that.
Yeah, that's a nice little.
Ain't too bad for an old redneck,
From Kentucky, from
Hick from the sticks, baby.
And
Anyway.
it's not a well-known place in Kentucky where we're from. Like everyone thinks in Kentucky,
Everybody thinks of Louisville, everybody thinks of
Louisville.
Lexington, to a degree, maybe Paducah.
Yeah.
We got two lakes.
E-Town. We got E-Town.
E-Town,
yeah.
Bowling Green, Owensboro.
Yeah.
Catawba, not so much, but we're near Lake Barkley and Kentucky Lakes. People know where that is. Good bass fishing.
But I think Kentucky, like we talked about, is like known for right now. It's even in the past few years now is how big the bourbon boom is. The bourbon boom is, we talked about, we talked about the laws of bourbon, but I think it was 95% of all bourbon is still produced in Kentucky.
Yeah, and I know people want to think that legally it's got to be made in Kentucky. It doesn't have to be, but a lot of the good stuff gets made in Kentucky. But the interesting part is, there's the book Bourbon Justice by Brian Hara, and you had like Adam Koenig. He's not in the state house anymore, but he was the big push for the direct-to-consumer legislation they had in Kentucky. Last year, they expanded the law where distilleries could basically have a tasting room that was off-site.
Right.
And what I've always wanted to see is, are they going to set up in Louisville or are they going to set up in northern Kentucky? Because both have their pros and cons. Right. Kentucky is always really on the cutting edge of the industry meets the government piece. So
what I think about it, what I love about every time I go down is honestly, it's like you go to distilleries and we're
talking
nerds
about that. I heard First Sergeant.
We're going
to talk about that.
We're nerds about that when you go down and see things.
Yeah.
It's always great about when you go to some of these distilleries and someone's been, they're like, there's a famous guy from Buffalo Trace, Freddie, that's third generation. But you go to these other places and you really talk to them a lot. We had a tour guide on Tuesday at Buffalo Trace. He's new to the group. I mean, he's had family that's worked at Buffalo Trace for years. I think his dad was a machinist or an uncle or something. And that's what's great about those places, that they have so much history. And it's American history,
and it's
right?
American, and it's people that they busted their ass to sell. Like we all know, we know Ann Demick, who works for OHLQ here, and she worked for Watershed, but she worked for Campari and Wild Turkey, and she tells me stories of like when she do tasting with Jimmy Russell or any of the Russell family, and they'd be at a Giant Eagle. Nobody showed up. If I put on Facebook right now, Jimmy Russell's going to be at the Giant Eagle in Stowe, do you know how many freaking taters would line that store 72 hours before?
He's some terms you guys don't have.
They busted their hump.
No, but
to sell their product.
But I think they've gotten to a point where it's now where I think they're reaping the reward.
Absolutely.
So like you guys, everyone can't see it, but there's the map of the United States behind me. That is signed by all the master distillers that I've met at some of the major distilleries. So it's always funny to take that. Yeah. We wrap it up in a blanket and we take it places and it looks like a rifle. People, it's awkward for a lot of people, but I talked to Fred. No, it's true. We laugh about it because you bring it out of your car and people are like, what is that? What is that? But what's great about that? I just talked to Freddie Johnson, who's I think it's third generation Buffalo Trace. Yeah. You talked about Neat. He's probably the most. He's more famous. He's more famous than the master distiller. But he was the first person to sign that. He's not a master distiller. I know that. However, we were talking about that. I showed him a picture of it. And the funny thing he said to me on Tuesday was like, do you know how valuable that is right now? And I was like, I'm not even thinking about the value. But people are. But I'm like, the reaction of taking and seeing taking that to Jimmy Russell. And if you're not into whiskey, like Eddie and then Bruce, all three of the Russells that sign, to see like Denny Potter, like when they see this and and some of the people that are down here have seen it. It is. They're getting their due. Like they've been producing something for a long time. It wasn't very popular. Now it's popular. They're like rock stars, which is kind of crazy. And you see it, and they're like, and I think it's funny to watch. They totally are. Yeah.
That's that. So it's funny you mentioned Freddie. Finally made Facebook friends with him, and it was last year my anniversary. I'm like, all you old taters can go for whatever you want. I got the best pick of all, and this picture of my wife and I. And Freddie liked it. It's kind of like that scene in The Jerk where Steve Martin looks in the phone book and sees his name. He's like, I am somebody. I felt like that. But it's just because the guy's a nice guy. They're all humble. They've been brought into fame they did not intentionally seek.
Yeah, but they brought a product that a lot of people love, and it's for a reason. I think that's the thing is I love it. There's nothing more enjoyable to see them. It's funny, like when you bring, we took it a couple places and people are really like, I don't want to bother. Like a good story is Four Roses with Brent. We went to Four Roses and we're like, we wanted him to sign this, and they're like, he's not here. Like, and we're like, can you check? And they're like, he's not here.
Okay.
Like, he's not here. And we're like 5 or 6 times. And one of the workers came in and he sees it. He's like, what is that? And we're like, oh, I'm trying to get these guys. And I'm like, I'm trying to get, Brent to sign it. He's like, oh, he's down at down there. I'll take it. He grabbed it and just took off. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, what did he do with it? Well, but he came back and he was like, this is super. He thought that was super cool to do. So that's my thing. Is like, it was funny to hear Freddie to say that the value, but the value to me it's irreplaceable because a lot of these guys like Jimmy who are, Jimmy's getting old. The no family is changing over. A lot of things are changing in a dynamic that if you're into it, it's an interesting time.
I got a good Jimmy Russell story. Then it reminds me, 10-year law school reunion. You all been to Lexington? You know that castle out where you're going toward Nicholasville? It used to be it was the.
I always tell Ken it'd be awesome to live there.
It's a cool event center. So
I thought it was somebody's house until like
they made it an event center. They got hotel rooms there. So
I didn't know that until like a year ago. I'm like, I want to live there so bad. It's
2014. Awesome. We had our reunion there. So I go in. This is the first time I've seen a lot of classmates since I've been in the Coast Guard. So wore my Bravos, all that crap. And Jimmy Russell's there, and he's got. When did Wild Turkey Honey come out? Did it come around 14? I don't know if it was kind of longer than that. Maybe it was longer than that. Yeah. So he had different expressions of Wild Turkey, and then he had those like octagonal picnic serving things. He had some kind of hooch in there. I'm like, sir, what do you think I should try? And he's like, well, I think you should drink every one of them. I said, yes, sir. Just the dude, and everybody has a cool Jimmy Russell story because he never forgot his roots. He worked his ass off to get where he was, and he's still humble about it because he just enjoys that people enjoy what he makes.
Yeah, and he's still at the distillery. If you not every day, but he's there pretty regularly. You definitely should go there, and it's pretty cool. So
I may be breaking protocol, but can I make a quick head call? Let you talk a little.
We've never had that happen before. We're gonna have Jason come in as a side in, and he's coming.
Can you give me 30 seconds?
Go. If you gotta go, you gotta go.
Yeah,
I mean, we've never had this happen before. Jason, get in here. Jump in the seat. We'll talk. We'll say hi to Jason real quick. I guess we've never had that happen before. This is interesting.
It's kind of surprising that hasn't happened before.
He's calling you first, sir, and it's so.
Give Jason his extra minutes.
I'm getting his extra minutes. So
yeah,
keep
that's how
tracking.
he's
keep
gonna
tracking this right
up.
now. So we're at. I'm tracking right now.
I gotta get a little more of this. I think.
What did you think of it?
It's different.
Yeah, it is a definite pick. A lot of people have different things. We're talking about whiskey now. We'll say in the thing.
Everyone's saying no, but
for me, the thing I'm saying that turns me off is the corn. It's too much corn. It's too high corn for me. Too high corn for me is bad, just like too high malted barley, like any one grain.
What about that 100% corn from Montana I brought?
It was awful. But
which is better?
This is better. It's different. It's just different. It's like a unique thing. But I don't think we've ever had a bathroom break. So Jason's got to go. He got 38 seconds in here. We got our guest back in there.
Then he'd be like, yeah, I would
get back in there.
I'd expect nothing less from the Coast Guard.
We're gonna give you
even hold his water.
This just actually told.
Can't even hold his water.
Yeah, it's all right. No, it's better that you take a break.
You want to stay hydrated, though, folks.
Yeah.
Stay hydrated.
Yeah, you should stay hydrated. So,
stay hydrated.
But your law career, you've done it all. You've been prosecutor, defense, like staff. Staff. You've done staff laws. Like, what's your favorite thing about being what was your favorite assignment as being a Coast Guard officer?
Sure. So we talked about when I was in.
You can talk about whatever you want.
Oh no, I'm saying we talked about being a prosecutor. We talked about doing the contract law work, and then I went over to 3-star when it was just kind of like general advice. So it'd be like if when you were captain, I guess were you a CO or anything?
Yeah,
or an XO? Yeah. So when you would call me and say, I got this issue going on with whatever. So I would do a lot of that stuff, and it could be. Should
I do this? And they're like, don't do that. No,
yeah,
exactly.
No. So it'd be stuff like that, and then I came up to 9th District, which was
that's an important job, though. And in the
even
at the company level, go get a company level, but yeah,
and so for us, like your guys, I think your JAGs in the Army would come in as first lieutenants. I'm not sure. I know they would do JAG school, and I don't know if they still even call it Bullock 1 and Bullock 2, but like they do.
I remember that term.
I remember they called it Bullock when you went through.
That term.
But you know,
But they're a
once it-
pivotal thing of like,
yeah,
before you keep going, like, I'm gonna
go ahead.
interrupt you, but those
No.
that's what a lot of people know. Any command, they have a lawyer that's on like we would say in the film, we're like kind of on retainer that there's a problem. You talk to them. They're the people that say, yeah, here's what you can do, here's what you can't do,
Yeah.
and they really gave you that. Like sometimes when you would think that it was a big deal or whatever, they would really say like, yeah, you can't do that. This is like, this is just an Article 15, but. But they were also the same people that were like you said earlier, which I thought it struck a chord with me, is like they were very adamant when like this person's a fucking criminal, like this.
But
is,
at the same
like
time,
we need to do what we need to do to.
But at the same time, like the whole UCMJ, and this is just kind of my opinion on the law. The whole UCMJ is designed ultimately to make sure that the force is enabled to execute mission. Maintain maximum lethality, whatever. There are certain things, like due process and stuff that's been brought in on the criminal side. But in the end, the UCMJ is a tool that is supposed to enable the commander to complete mission, execute and complete mission. And when I was taught through JAG school and through some of our judge advocates general, I remember one in particular be like, you all are not the operators. You are the operators' lawyers. You need to maintain that mentality. But so through that, at least for me, I looked at it through this lens. I'm a hick from the sticks. I don't know that much. I've come in as an 03. I've got a ketchup and mustard stain on my uniform. I just had the National Defense Service Medal. We didn't even have.
They got rid of that now. It's like gone
they
now.
got rid of that now.
Finally, it's official. Like
when you come
all you
out,
people are not getting any more.
unless
Sorry.
you get your weapons call. So I learned, all right, I might be coming in as an 03, and we came in as 03s. So there's already people see that on your uniform. They're expecting you. I mean, dude, you're an 03 and a CO and XO.
But there's a different thing. I think is when you look at. I think that when you really understand like the direct commissioning people, if you really look at it, like it's not a lore story, but I remember going. It was at actually Knox, and I was talking to a colonel. No 06. Sure. And it was an issue with the kids, and he's I'm an 03 at the time, and I'm talking to him, and he is like, I'm calling him sir, and he literally was like, oh, you don't have to call me sir. I'm like, sir, you're a colonel in the Army.
Yeah. And
he was like, I'm just a doctor, like I'm not a real colonel. I'm like, you are a real colonel. Like I mean, like you have 06, like and
it's
the
like
big picture about it, and I think
Caddyshack where the bishop
you talked about this about like
lightning says, "I'm just a man. My name's Frank."
No, this is the problem. I think what's going on. This is why we talk about things on this podcast. Is you said, hey, I've served my country. I'm in the Coast Guard. I didn't deploy anywhere. I've been on mobilizations, whatever. But you served your country. That's the thing.
I agree.
And even if you're like a brain surgeon and you came in and you're an 06. In the military, in the Army, Navy, whatever, you're still an 06.
You're doing more than 99% of the pop.
Yeah, you're still an 06, and I always gave those people that same respect. But it was very funny, like the doctors that I saw it mostly in the medical field where you're talking to them and they're just like, hey, listen, they just gave me this rank, and you're like, whoa, like I mean, but you're still sir, ma'am, it's the same thing.
The bluff to what I learned was this. By understanding my role, I understood that there were a lot of things I needed to figure out. So, I've went through 5 weeks of fork and knife school. It's good because I like to get to know people, like to get to know what they do and stuff like that. So it would be, tell me what you guys do at the boat station. Help me understand how the breakdown is here. Help me understand the breakdown of the command center, the air station, whatever. Because often the context is important as to what's going on. If you have somebody who's maybe causing a little bit of trouble, it might not seem like a big deal to a lot of other folks. But if you've got somebody who's on a boat crew and they're really causing a problem, this is a boat crew that goes out on patrol. And if this person is causing issues that's really keeping them off mission focus, that's a huge problem to someone like you who's the operational commander or the operations side of the house. So that was the big thing I learned. But it was the other part too, is we're a military organization. What does the commander want to do? Ultimately, we make recommendations. I mean, a command, your officer exercising general court martial convening authority, or your officer exercising special court martial convening authority. They're the one who are going to create the court martial. It's not like we got a courthouse we go to. It is, it is a thing that's created. You have to figure out what they're wanting to do, and then you provide advice based on your understanding of law. But I understood even as a junior officer, I was going to be plucked in those meetings with 06s, 07s, and I would be expected to provide thoughtful advice on the issue. And in some cases, if needed, say but sir, but ma'am, you need to look at it from this perspective. But I always understood there was just that learning gap because, again, ketchup and mustard stain.
Yeah.
Somebody who's first sergeant, are you, Jason, you E6, E7?
8.
E8, sorry. So you're a senior chief in the Coast Guard. I'm not going to act like I know more than you if I'm talking to you about something. I'm going to be like,
you probably do know.
Well, I'm a lieutenant commander now. At some point, I'll be a lieutenant colonel equivalent. I don't know if that's
then
good
you
or
know
bad.
way more.
I read a lot of the Duffel blogs, so I hear that's pretty bad. I can't believe that they went to Pafer because they had some of the best Coast Guard articles. Coast Guard cutter capsizes, dust's wet.
No, but
but that's the other part. You gotta inject the humor. If you don't make fun of yourself,
but what you talked about, I think, is you're bringing some stuff that I think a lot of people in the military aren't aware of and doing that. And it is a role that if you are a commander, if you've ever been a commander, the JAG person, whether it's Coast Guard or the Army, Navy, and all that kind of stuff, they definitely are the people that someone will say that is just used to saying like this, we're going to do that, and then if you had a good JAG, attorney would say like, yeah, maybe this, or did you look at this? And then, but it gauge you in the right way. And it's an important role because, there's, a lot of people don't, it gets a lot of criticism is like the Article 15 process as a commander, battalion commander, you're like, you're it all. You're prosecutor, judge, jury, you're everybody. And
it's a heavy responsibility.
Yeah. And then but when it gets out of that realm where you're talking about something where you feel like, this person, understands the welfare of the unit. They understand military UCMJ. They can do this, but it was always that thing of like, I always felt as a commander, you don't want to kick it. Like you don't want to. I never want to kick anybody out of the military, right? Sure. Like nobody want to get kicked, because they're one of you. But it comes to a point like sometimes you're like, let's just smack this person on the hand. And you're like, no, this is like, and I had that happen when I was a young platoon leader.
It's a lot to deal with.
And I actually was this guy got court-martialed and did 3 years in jail, and it was rough for me. I mean, he got sentenced for 3 years, but he didn't do 3 years. Sure, it's a great story. We're not going to talk about it, but
got it.
But it was awful because you as much as this person is engaged in a criminal activity, it's still one of your brothers. It's still one of your soldiers. And then it just everything continues to like snowball. Like, oh gosh, this guy's, he's probably only going to do 1.5 years, but he has a dishonorable discharge. He's going to be away from his family. He lost his VA benefits. So it's a serious thing that
by 2017, when I got out, I'd been dealing with those situations, and you realize how heavy of an issue it is for the operational commander, whatever you're advising on. And I've also been a hearing officer in Article 32 cases. Like I remember and that's the one that makes the recommendation on where the case should go if you're considering a general court martial. Yeah. I was an Article 32 officer in a shaken baby case. Good Lord, man, that sucked. But, I had to listen to the evidence and I had to offer my opinion based on the evidence that was presented, based on in conjunction with the evidentiary rules. But by the time I was reaching the end of active duty, I still believe this, at the point where we're having to deal with Article 15ing somebody, or masting, as we call it in the naval services. We use a green tablecloth. I don't know if you guys use the green tablecloth. For us, if you see green tablecloth, it means somebody's about to have a bad day.
I've never heard that.
That's what I love about this. You
learn these traditions, and I'm not even sure the historical context, but I still believe this to this day. If you're reaching that point where you're having to do any of that, there was a failure in the system along the way. And I really believe it, either at the recruiting stage or the initial processing stage or somewhere along the way there was a failure.
Yay and nay, because I think there's
there are some just evil
we
people,
put ourselves at a level of like everyone's in the military. Like I said before, like you think you're, as I get older, you're like, we're definitely different than everyone else, right? We're
Sure.
not better, we're different. And then you think that everybody, although we have the same common goal, which is to serve our country, all these things happen. We're still exposed to the same things that happen
Sure.
to the regular world. So you could be a good person. You could run, that one night you could run into, a situation where you probably shouldn't have been in, and we've all been there before, and you make a bad decision, and it doesn't make you a bad person. But I think the hard part is I felt like at that level, when you get the company battalion, it gets bigger. It's like, that person at an intimate level, and you want. I don't know anybody that's ever wanted to be like, look at somebody like, I hope that fucking guy gets shot. Like, I want to ruin the person. Like, it's not like that. And it's you or gal, you're like, they're your family, and you want them to do well. And it's a huge disappointment when like you get a call and be like, what, this guy just, beat the hell out of his wife. And you're like, this guy has everything going for him.
So you are correct.
Yeah.
There are some situations where some really bad things happen. There are also a lot of those, but for the grace of God, go I.
Right.
The only reason I still maintain that position, and this is somebody who's at some point going to go into senior leadership and potentially, be an XO or a CO at a reserve unit. I would rather keep that mentality to try to be aware of, are there any gaps in how I'm managing the unit? Is there anything I can do to mitigate it from happening? You're not going to prevent anything. I get it. But I'm always going to hold that mentality for that. But now here's the other part of it, Shay. After I went off active duty, I spent a few months, worked at Progressive Insurance, and then there was an opportunity to go back on an ADOS contract, active duty for operational support orders, representing folks who went through med boards or PEBs, as some of you guys might be familiar. So I did that. And you asked me what assignments I like the best. Overall, as in terms of assignment, that was probably the most fulfilling in my career. One, because everybody's going through their career in the military. No one, look, sometimes there are guys that sham and make up crap and they're trying to get out. It happens. And you generally can kind of tell if they are. But you also have the folks who get afflicted with something. It might be an injury. It might be a disease. And I had clients that had everything from, busted bones to freaking Lyme disease to, type 4 glioblastoma brain cancer. And, they pass away a few days after I meet them. A lot of these folks are being told it stinks, but we have certain medical standards in the service and you can no longer serve. And, I credit my mom because, again, she's the most sympathetic person I know, of being able to kind of guide people through that and get them through the process. Because when you're going through a PEB, you're figuring out, are you going to be able to get a medical retirement or not?
Right.
So there's that piece of it. And then, that leads into whatever VA disability percentage that you get assigned to you or not.
And I would challenge that even like nowadays, like for my time, it's changed. There's, it's gotten now into like PTSD. It's gotten into like, TBI, where these people are like, I had a E6 in my unit that we ended up medically, fighting the medically retired. This guy for 16 years did amazing things, right? And then he just he had a problem, right? He had an issue, and like to a lot of people in the chain of command, it's like, hey, this guy is chap this person out, but this guy did 16 years. This guy's a shitbag. Yeah, or demote him to this. I'm like, this guy, this person has done this. Yeah, so I could see where I made a note of that when you did that.
And that was the other part I was going to. So you got the people who are having something happen. They're really good performers, but they're basically being told you have to leave, and it's how it is. You have others who are kind of like what you alluded to, that let's be honest, they might have mental health issues or something like that going on, and they're just kind of a shitbag. And hold on, let me go through this, and you'll understand when I get to the end. when I came in on active duty, I would willingly, because I didn't have enough time advising commands, I felt comfortable talking to senior officers very candidly. And I would say, okay, give me the ones that maybe have a med board issue, but also are about to face admin discharge or something else. Because I would be the one who would call the XO or the CO and say, look, I understand from your perception, this person is, shitbag. But there are some legitimate things going on. I am going to promise you that to the best of my ability, I will make sure I can keep them in line. But they have some legitimate stuff going on. Let's get them to a good resolution. Because this again goes to the whole idea of what we are of our respective armed forces. We're supposed to execute mission. We're supposed to execute mission with the people we have. But at some point in time, we are releasing, and maybe that's the wrong word, these folks are no longer going to be active or reserve military members. They are going to be part of the civilian population, and the expectation is they're going to be able to integrate in society or be able to work in society without having that military connection. And it's incumbent upon all of us to make sure that we're doing the transition in the best manner possible. And sometimes you will get people that might have whatever issue going on that has led to disciplinary issues. I think about, there was a former Atlantic area commander, and then he was our deputy commandant for operations, Admiral Dean Lee, who now does prison ministry full time. I mean, but he's got retired 3-star salary, so he's got some money to do what he wants. But jokes aside, he was a really, really good admiral and leader, and he would talk about stories. He came to the Army JAG School of Training about experiences he had to deal with as the 3-star operational commander. And he said, I always tell the JAGs this: sometimes we have to punish, but we don't need to over punish. And it was really rooted in his philosophy as an officer, but also for him as Christian faith. And I really ascribe to that too. We got to do what we got to do for mission, but we also have to remember we have responsibilities outside of that, right? And it was funny, after I did the 2 years of doing the med board work, I would reflect back on some of the cases when I was a prosecutor or as what we'd call a command advice attorney. I was like, did I really think about the option of, was there a med board here? Is there a solution I could have crafted for this person to transition out differently? Because we do have a responsibility to the public in the end.
Yeah, I mean, because if you
I'm not coming across as a softie. Sometimes people they need to be hammered.
No, there's
hard.
But I think the job you just talked about, the medical board, is there's a lot of things that have changed.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you went back to I got on 05, so you go back to those days and you start talking about you're stressed out, or you have it wasn't these people, there's something triggered those people. Like they've done some things that the PTSD, we do that all the time. Someone has PTSD. They, all of a sudden they get a drinking problem. They stop coming to work. They start all kind of stuff, and all of a sudden, like, what happened to this person that was a model for 15 years? Signals. And to be honest with you, if you're realistic and you want to understand it, the command is like, fuck this guy or gal, like, get them the fuck out of here. They're paying, but you need the advocates that are saying, hey, this person, what is the root cause for this? And a lot of it is now, as it continues to go, there is a medical reason, a validated medical reasons that we have to be aware of, and that's an important job that you have.
And we haven't. I mean, this is a good segue or anything, because we already talked about it. I think the other part that I can relate well to the experience is, I did 30 days inpatient. I was burned out, but I had my 05 who I worked for, who was very big at practicing what he called intrusive leadership.
Right.
And that's like, when you see the signals, you go find out what the issue is and see if you can fix it. And I'm always like, when I was on active duty, the legal office, our paralegal had these little ceramic M&M's jars with different kinds of M&M's in them, because nobody wants to go see the lawyer. Nobody likes us. We're awful. Nobody voluntarily comes to see us unless they're coming to get a will done or something. We got a civilian lawyer who does that.
Yeah.
But I, around 16, it was the beginning of 2016, I had absolutely burned out. And it was, do my job, go home, stop by Little Caesars, eat half a pizza, do just enough laundry to make sure my uniform and stuff is up to speed, go to sleep in my recliner, and repeat the next day. And it wasn't a bad spot. And my my boss said, go see the flight surgeon. And he's flight surgeon, so he's the air stations doctor, but he was, Harry Coe, I'll mention him. I think he's in 06 now. And I remember him telling me, he's like, if I tell you to take 2 weeks leave, you're not going to do anything with it. And he was right. And I spent 30 days in inpatient with where we send the folks when they have a drug incident or they have an alcohol incident or something like that. Met some really good people along the way. And when I came back into the fold, it really informed how I did my job as a prosecutor, as a command advice attorney. Now in my roles as a reserve officer, it informs what I do. The one thing I'll say, at least about the Coast Guard, I don't know about the other services, but there are a ton of resources there. And even now, and now in particular, we don't want to lose people because we're trying to find more people. There's lots of resources there. I mean, it's incumbent upon the leader to know what they are and find those resources and get them for folks. And it's incumbent upon the members to kind of know what's out there and reach out. And it's always going to be battling a stigma. I get
Yeah,
that.
yeah. You mentioned that before that, and I again, like Mike, I thank you for sharing that. It doesn't. It makes us very real, very
I'm
quick.
not the only officer.
No, it makes it
I'm
very
just
real
one of the
quick and
few
very real.
that'll
And
talk about it.
yeah, no, but I appreciate you feeling comfortable to share it and to share it with the people here and then that are watching. But the one thing it does, the good thing about this is, like, this is a case where it happened. It can happen to anyone. It can happen to a JAG attorney. It can happen to a truck driver. It can happen to a cook. It can happen to an infantryman. There's like the lead. It doesn't.
It can be
it
the
does,
motor
it shouldn't,
T or
it
the
should,
med
yeah,
officer.
it shouldn't be a career killer, and that's
No.
that's the problem. Is like everybody eventually hits the wall, right? They hit where they can't do that, and I think that's a stigma, like, that it still goes on, and active duty is still there. I haven't been in there, but I don't think it's changed much. Where if you just walk into we're giving Jason our time, you walk in the first sergeant's office and say I don't want to do this anymore. Especially now in the command climate, I want to get out or whatever. It's not going to be like, oh, why do you want to get out? And it's not going to be a warm and fuzzy conversation. And I'm busting on Jason, but Jason may handle it different. But majority of people are not. It's going to be a negative.
I think a
experience.
first sergeant would handle it.
It's going to be it's
He
going to
would
be
balance his.
They'd probably be like, you should get
responsibility.
out. Can I go with you? No, I'm kidding.
He would balance his first sergeant responsibility.
No, but I mean,
with,
but you're right. And the one thing I think you said is, like, these people that are getting out there, some people that absolutely need to get kicked out of the military.
but there
They
are some
absolutely
who are
they
gun decking and
absolutely
milking
need
it.
to never have any benefits of serving, that come along with serving the military, which are your VA benefits. But there's other people that do actually get caught up in, I'll call the waves, and they get kicked out. They've had circumstances that aren't really understood, and they get kicked out. And you get kicked out of the military with a other
Even a
honorable
general,
discharge or
yeah,
general,
or an OTH.
and your life is it's not that good nowadays. You know what I mean?
I mean,
so
general or OTH.
yeah, it's important to make sure that you and your brothers and sisters hold a very important job in the military, as well as the Coast
And you
Guard.
want to help out because, like, even here in Ohio, we got a great. I don't know how much you all work with the Veterans Service Commission in your counties and stuff, but, like, Ohio does pretty good by its veterans, I think. And there's a lot of resources out there.
Right. So before we get deep, because Mike we're gonna transition from his lawyer stuff to what he does on some other great things he does. We're gonna sell out to Sazerac and Buffalo Trace tonight. We've been waiting a long time to do this. Some people that have been watching,
You don't
a couple
have
of my
any
friends
Z
are like,
and Blantons
why
in
haven't
there.
you talked about Bland's
There's no
this,
Z.
Bland's that? So, and the reason I bring it up is obviously we're just down there on Tuesday. Every time I go there, it's a great experience. And then, for all of us bourbon nerds, Blanton's is what saved, in my mind, as much as you don't want it, a lot of people don't want to admit it, but it's the first single barrel bourbon. It is kind of attributed to saving it and making, like we talked about, as I talked about this, making master distills, like a guy named Elmer T. Lee. Everybody knows who he is. If you went back to like the 70s, they had no idea who this guy was. But Blanton's is actually distilled in Frankfort, Kentucky. it's that distillery, like we talked about, has been around for many years. It got taken over. It got bought out in 1992 by the Sazerac company. It's been known by several names throughout its time. The George T. Stagg Distillery, Old Fire Copper Distillery. Some of the things that obviously its namesake bourbon is Buffalo Trace. We've talked about some other ones here. Weller.
You got to put a Z on that too. It's
Wellers. Yeah, Wellers. But there's tons of products that they produce. It's actually, as they love to talk about, it's the oldest continuously run distillery, even through Prohibition. They had the license to produce medicinal whiskeys during Prohibition, and it's named after the Buffalo Trace, which refers to the ancient Buffalo Crossing on the banks of Kentucky River in Franklin County. Blanton's, like we said before, if you don't know about Blanton's and you're in whiskey, you're not really into whiskey. Or if you, it's probably one of the most popular whiskeys out there. Or bourbons out there. It's pretty funny. It's a great bottle, and we looked at it, and we got some stuff here we'll talk about as we go on. But Blanton's was first introduced in 1994. There's a lot of lore that goes around it, but the master distiller at the time was nearing, Elmer Tilly was nearing his retirement. He was tasked at creating a bourbon, a really high quality bourbon to kind of help save what was going on at the distiller at the time. He'd been at the distillery for a long time. He recalled years ago when he had worked under Colonel Albert B. Blanton, who was a president of the distillery until 1952. Elmer had remembered that when he had special occasions, Colonel Blanton would go to Warehouse H, grab these single barrels. He would bring it out to all kinds of different people. And, and he remembered him referring to as these honey barrels. So he brought that back. He kind of followed along with what Colonel Albert Blanton did, brought that online as the first single barrel bourbon that was out there, and obviously named it after Colonel Blanton. Right. And so Blanton. So I have this out in front if you can't see it. If you're not into whiskey, or you are, but actually there's horses on the top that actually spell out Blanton's, not Blanton's with a Z, but Blanton's.
You have to listen to my show to understand.
Yeah,
the fun
but
there's 3 Z's on.
Yeah, but
show.
It's great. But it depicts like a horse race all the way from the beginning all the way to the end. And what's cool about this, it's getting harder and harder to do. But if you're able to get all the toppers that are, if you can spell out Blanton's with original toppers, which have been in the bottle, right? You can tell, they can tell there. You actually send those in, and they will send you that stave.
Yep.
They'll send it back to you with all your toppers on it and that stave.
To do that. B-L-A-N-T-O-N. It looks like a colon. It's not apostrophe. It's a colon.
Umlaut. Is umlaut?
Maybe an umlaut.
But yeah, what's interesting about Blanton's is it's probably the most popular. It's one of the most popular bourbons, right? For what we call taters, people that are new into it. It's not bad at all, but it's not as great as everybody.
Better.
Yeah, it's been in many movies. The John Wick series. So hopefully John Wick 4 is coming out soon. Hopefully they get some bourbon. And there's a lot of things go, but generally Blanton's, we have the normal Blanton's here. We'll have a pour of it. It's non-age stated. It's usually 6 to 8 years old, 93 proof, and it's mash bill number 2, which is considered their high rye mash bill. Sazerac and Buffalo Trace does not release their mash bill, so it's anywhere from, they say, a higher mash bill from like 12 to 16% rye. So it's been a while since I've had
that black label. I've never tried the.
And this one's actually from 2019.
Nice.
So it's
So as I was telling the guys earlier,
maybe it's better than the newer ones, whatever. But
my wife is. I want to try the black one, the regular one. I'll pass this over to them. I want to try
this is green actually, but it is black. Okay, no green.
So
green. I can't. We can't tell.
My wife Lindsay, who is suffering in Santa Barbara right now, she was executive director of the Cleveland chapter of the Alzheimer's Association, and now she's a national officer, I guess. I don't know a better way to describe it. But she would do these, like all these organizations of these annual galas. And she's like, can you get me a set of Blantons? Well, I did. Took forever. Dude,
it's going to be harder now, though.
Dude bought a full set last summer for $7,000, dude. Yeah. And she's like, you still got to do it. What kind of degrading things I had to do to get these Blanton's bottles?
Do you know the acts I have to perform?
Blanton's.
No, but it's
Oh.
but back in the you have to in back we say back in the day. If you go back to
collected dust
2017,
'cause it was too expensive.
16, nobody was buying it.
Except in Japan.
Yeah,
Japan is where a lot of the traction
But-
went for Blanton's.
But Blanton's is actually Japanese owned right now. I didn't
right.
put that in there. It's at the Blanton's brand is actually Japanese owned. It is distilled and aged at Buffalo Trace, so it is actually a Japanese company.
Right.
And one of the ones you have here,
Oh.
if you can't see this, is the
I'm too
Blanton's
grabby.
green, and we
Sorry.
pulled some other ones, but there's there's Blanton's gold, there's Blanton's black, there's straight from the barrel,
Yeah,
there's some other
there's,
good products. Yeah,
Japanese characters.
yeah.
on
So
here. They
and
found
there's
a huge market in Japan.
yeah, and it's in the past couple of years there was I think it was Blanton's green and
Is
straight
that
from the barrel that was actually came into the United States.
was
for a
there?
short
There
period
was
of
a
time,
blue one too. Is that the Polish one? The blue one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's different things, but as I tasted, it's funny. Like it
I'm
gets.
a tater. Sorry.
It's not bad at all. But everybody, as we talked about this before, you try different things. If I gave this to someone, there's nothing wrong with plans, but it is funny that
There's
people
not.
people go crazy over it. But
It's a
I
good
will
whiskey.
always, as a whiskey guy, have a love for it because it has launched into what we love. Like if we're whiskey guys and gals or bourbon guys, we love single barrel stuff. That's what
Yeah.
all of us chase. So this is the first one. Back to 84. This if Elmer T. Lee hadn't done this,
But I'll
Where
offer,
would it be?
I'll offer. Agree, and I'll offer this though. If I'm not the one who camps out at the store the night before, and I'm not going to pay crazy amounts of money for Blanton's. But this is what I say for folks that are coming into bourbon: go find a good bar. If you're in Columbus, I heard this awesome place called Opa Grill and Tavern. Go to some place like that. Try out a pour. First off, you're going to meet really cool people that own the place. At least I hear the Opa guy's
Hopefully,
kind
yeah.
of cool. I don't think he's that much of a jabron. Or up in Twinsburg, we got like Brewster's up where I live and stuff. But go try something there, see if you like it, and then you can go on the chase or the hunt. I get it.
Yeah.
And I'm never going to knock somebody for paying whatever amount of money they want to pay. It's freaking capitalism, even though it's technically federally illegal. But it's legalities.
But it is a great bottle. If you look at it, it is. If you look at it, it's great marketing, and it's not. It's funny. Everybody, if you're
That's
into
good.
if you're new to bourbon, you're super excited about it. It's like the Grail. If you've been in it for a while or a long time, everybody wants to
is.
shit on bourbon.
Just don't post on it on
Blanton's,
Facebook because you probably get
Yeah.
screenshotted onto Tater Tails.
which is great. So Mike has talked a lot about his, the military and the JAG part, but he what's interesting about him as well.
I always wanted to write for the Duffel blog under the handle Jag Off because I thought that'd be really cool.
Jag off. That's
Jag
a good
Off.
one. But we learned a lot about him. He's a huge whiskey guy, just like we are, which is fun to talk about. But one of the other things that you actually have, you're a big volunteer, right? You volunteer
That's right,
outside
too.
of the military,
Sure.
and do things. So you're part of the Twinsburg Planning Commission. You also help out with the kids choir show.
Yeah.
What motivates you to do that?
So Planning Commission was last year. What year are we in? 2023.
Yeah.
So 2021, I ran for school board. It was the dumbest thing I ever did. But I had a friend who was on the school board. That's the
dumbest thing you've ever did.
That was one of the dumbest things I did. A friend who was on the school board, and she twisted my arm for 7 months, and I finally did it. I lost. It was good. Because if I had won, I would have to make sure I was at meetings every other weeks. Wouldn't be able to do my reserve work like I want to. I know you're not talking politics, but as folks who probably listen to anything, schools became a big political thing in 2021 and 2022. I think the good thing that has come out of that is everybody pays a little bit more attention about what happens with their kids, and that's always a good thing. But my wife did community theater for years, and she was in show choir. I didn't know what show choir was. We didn't have it in Lyon County High School,
On the farm?
Eddyville, Kentucky, on the farm.
They're like,
I wasn't.
like that. Like that was the show.
Okay, so I got to tell this story. It is a farm story. So
I got to be careful because I get to distract Mike real quick.
yeah, I
He's
know.
like,
Yeah, I can squirrel, but I'll be
Yeah.
quick. So when you're raising pigs, taking them to market, you have what are called top hogs, and those are the ones ready to go to the market. Well, we had a very scientific system. We had a couple of 2x4s that were put into a rectangle, and we'd bring all the pigs into the barn and feed them, and then we'd run them out, and whoever couldn't fit through the frame went to the market. So when I was about 5 years old, there was this one pig. He was the top hog. He was kind of slow moving. We called him Pork Along. It's the coolest thing name ever. Like I'd ride him and stuff, and then Pork Along was gone. And this is not a lie. I'm not embellishing. One day we're eating pork tenderloin, and I asked my dad and mom, I said, "What happened to Pork Along?" Dad's like,
You're eating them right now. It's pretty tasty.
everybody's like, "Oh my gosh, what'd you do?" I said, "I took another bite. It's good pork tenderloin." But anyway, sorry about that.
Pork along.
Pork Along. It's a cool name.
You're talking about other worst decision.
But
Running for the board.
running for school board. But so
Show choir.
anyway, I married into a family. My wife did community theater for years. She was, you all probably, I don't know if you all watched Annie, the old movie that had Carol Burnett as Mrs. Hannigan, and Mrs. Hannigan would always flirt with the laundry guy. So my wife was Miss Hannigan, and I found a way to be Mr. Bundles, the laundry guy, so I could blow off my soon-to-be wife on stage. Well, I proposed to her at the end of the season.
That's cool.
So I'm getting into this. It's a performing family, and they're show choir. So people who are not familiar with show choir, if you watch the show Glee, that's kind of what a show choir is.
I try not to watch that.
I know that the family likes it. They'll watch stuff like that in the Bachelor. I'm just like, if it's not a Slayer concert, I don't care. But,
I just leave the room if my like.
Yeah,
I
I go do something else.
was like, someone's on the phone. I'll be right back.
Exactly.
It's
It's like Ty Webb on Caddyshack got a thing. But show choir is really competitive stuff. Those guys work really hard on the choreography, the acts and stuff. I volunteered Saturday, and I volunteered in the kitchen because I don't really like people, but my mom ran a school cafeteria, so I feel most at home there. But I'll volunteer at that. But honestly, it's whatever my wife tells me to do. I mean, that's what it boils down to. The planning commission was just something that I was asked to put in for, and it's something to do in the community. I mean, I'm still serving because I do my reserve work, but I also know that we're not talking politics. I can be a very polarizing person with my bourbon selections and everything else. I know my role is just sometimes being a person working in the back, cooking corn and putting mashed potatoes on a plate.
Which is important, though. I mean, there's like it's
servant leadership.
Baby. Yeah, there's the things that as we try to figure out what everyone wants to figure out why our demographic of people are committing suicide at an astronomical rate. There's things that like you just get out there. What sometimes you don't want to do these things and it's out of your comfort zone, but
You
give
need
it a shot. Sit down and watch Glee, Jason. You might like it. I might like it. No, I'm probably not. But no, I'm just.
I mean, it's kind of sad because one of the
getting out
stars
serving,
of
because that's the one
Glee
thing the
didn't
military
take
you
his
get
life.
out and then like
It's kind of the sad thing about
you go to corporate America and like or whatever you're doing something else, you don't feel like you're really providing for your community. So reach out. There's tons of organizations.
There are tons. There's Legions, VFWs, and vets. Team Rubicon. I'm a huge fan of Team Rubicon. Are any of all familiar with Team Rubicon?
I am, yeah. But
so I mean, those guys they organize well, and they actually send people out and do stuff. When I was at Allies Welcome, and we were at Fort Dix, they had it was like 16 tractor trailers worth of donated goods, and Rubicon came in and inventoried all of that stuff. Yeah. And I figure I got about 15, 16 more years of work in my civilian job. I'll stay in the reserve as long as they'll let me, but then I'm going to go volunteer for Rubicon. They're good people.
Right.
Find something to do to contribute to your community. If you've been in the military, it gets you at some point, and it's hard for military folks to hear us. At some point, you've got to permanently hang up the uniform. At least from a mental perspective, you're going to have to do it.
It's not hard for some people.
It's not hard for some.
Jason's
for
like, I hang that thing up. No,
dude,
I mean, but it's we're making we're making some jokes, but it is one of the things. Like it is very hard to turn it off. But I think one of the key things I would say is like the serving is like obviously we served our country. We put a huge commitment, whether it's 4 years, it's 20, it's 30 years. You are compelled to serving others. That's what that's the thing is I think when you get out, there's not a lot of people that think that way. It's about themselves. It's about their family or their job, and then
Right.
they could give two fucks about the person two doors down the street. They could give two shits about
Some
the girl
people run
doing the
toward
Girl
it,
Scout cookies, but
even the Coast Guard guys.
right, yeah, no, but it's and I think that's the thing is like I tell all the veterans is find something that connects to you, right? Like that you feel like you're serving because as much as you want to say that, we're giving out Jason a hard time, but Jason's a member Jason's a member of this charitable organization and this nonprofit organization that you want to serve, you want to help others. So to reach out, whether it's the show choir, it's
It's whatever.
yeah, it's being helping out at a Boy Scout, a Girl Scout. I mean,
Yeah.
Going to the food bank, once or twice
Anything.
Yeah, just get out there and get back into serving, right? Like,
and here's the thing, and I look at it this way: for some, it may be the best if they don't do it, and I get it. It is contextual to the person, right? But for others, there's lots of other opportunities, and you mentioned a few. All of us who are a vet, we've probably gone through stuff. The VA, get trained up as a VA claims rep. That's a really good job that you can help a lot of people with stuff. I mean, look, PACTAC came through. I'm betting some of the guys here in this room, there might be some burn pit exposure issues where they could, get some benefits for it. I always tell folks, like, don't feel prideful. You earned whatever benefits are given to you because, look, Social Security is going away. I don't mean to get political. I'm afraid it's going to go away. But I don't think my VA benefits.
Can we mute him? No, I'm kidding. No, I'm joking. But no, but that was the question.
Is he counting on this?
He's flown into some things we're talking about. Like you did, with you said one of the things that you're not, you've helped through that with the last job you had, or not the last job, but on active duty. But one of the things you found the most fun was the medical boarding people out and find out about the VA benefits. But if you've listened to this a couple of times, I'm not a huge VA guy.
I get it.
No, my experience is different. And I understand it. And I'm trying
to benefits, not the actual getting services. I got
but it takes time.
Five people I can tell you they'll talk about their whatever local clinic they're like this.
No, but what I mean is like as I do this more, I'm trying to be more responsible. It's like, okay, this was my experience. Like I talked to.
It's called truth to power, man.
I talked to a couple last weekend that he's a major. He's coming on in June. His wife's a therapist. Right away it was like, I don't like therapists. Like that's that was my time, but I have to learn that that's me.
I get that
before, but like the same thing with the benefits is you have to do what you have to do. And I think one of my things is I'm still too prideful to be like, hey, I'm going to go to the VA. I'm going to fight for what I want. I want to like what I deserve. Right. And that's the hard thing. And I would tell everybody that's me. Don't be stupid like me. My father tells me I'm stupid all the time. I've been agreeing with my dad. Eventually I will. Yeah, but there are some things like what would you tell someone, like one of the questions I had in all seriousness was, what would you advise to give veterans? What advice would you give veterans regarding VA claims, VA benefits? What would you, in your experience that you've had, and how? Because I think you're super involved in that and have a lot of experience.
This to a lot of coasties. So when you're in the military, you don't want people to know you have things going on because you don't want to lose your job, right? That's a fully understandable,
which is
human
bullshit,
response. But at the same point, when it comes time to talk with the VA, and this is what my old XO, the guy who was on the ship from Perfect Storm, told me, you tell them everything. When you do that final physical, you tell them everything. You tell them everything that you got going on. And I've talked to folks who, this is what usually stops it. It is usually a sense of service and duty that's been hammered and forged through years of service. And like, I don't feel comfortable saying that. Bullshit. You served your country. Things happen to you medically, or you're with your mental health, you need to lay it out on the table.
Yeah.
You need to let the doc know. And then when you go to that VSO, whether it's the DAV or the Legion or your County Veteran Service Commission, what they're going to do is they're going to file that initial claim. And they're not going to be super specific. They're not going to be like your VASR code, your Veterans Administration Schedule of Ratings for Disability. They're not going to put your vet's going to be like ankle hurts, this, that. You let it all out. You earned it.
Yeah.
You earned it. And if you are too prideful to look at it from yourself. This is money for your family. It's tax-free money for your family. The VA benefits are for your family. Just put the pride aside.
But unbelievable advice, and I will tell you,
Because there are a lot of people
It's
who are like, I don't feel
they're
comfortable
stupid,
doing that, and I respect it.
I think it's stupid or prideful, like I am, and like, but you have to
Just
look
go
at the
to
time.
a scandalous
you have to-
lawyer like me who
but you-
has, no
But you
scruples.
have to go to the time, and like when you look at it, like when I got out on active duty, 2005, I was going through the Dallas VA
Yeah.
to get out. I'm doing my initial screening and stuff, and I literally look over, and there's a dude who's missing his fucking leg, and you're there, and you want to talk about how my back hurts, or like I take I take 1,800 milligrams of Motrin a day for something.
Good old Navy
Like
candy.
you look over there, or then you look to your left, and there was a dude missing their arm. Like there's a time, like I think it's a prideful thing, and sometimes, but it depends.
But it's also respect of like this guy has it worse. So Che, and
Well, you want that. You obviously want that person to be
here's the deal.
taken
So
care
this, you're asking
Right?
what I'd say is, I'd be like, all right, in that circumstance, we're talking about your disability. We're not talking about you actually getting the medical care from VA. Now, I'll tell you this, like I get VA disability because when I went off active duty, I actually got discharged. I don't go to the VA medical center. I have my own medical
Yeah, but the word
insurance.
disability, what is that? We're talking about the same thing. What is if you tell somebody you're disabled, like there's a stigma to that.
So
still.
yeah, and
There's a stigma to that.
That's fair. So I would
Like
say
if I
this,
look at it, it's like
I would-
I'm 40%. If I told you I'm 60% disabled,
I would
veterans,
say,
people are
so
going to go,
this-
"What
no.
are you 60% disabled?" Like
this is
I
fair.
got frostbite in my toe.
I'm glad you
I got arthritis in my back.
my neck and my
I got
back, like the dude
I've
in
got
Friday.
I've got tinnitus. And then you're like, they go, "Oh gosh, yeah, my brother was in Iraq and he got hit by an IED and he's missing both of his legs." And you're like,
So
like there's a
here's
the disabled thing is rough.
Here I
Or
was
like
playing,
I'm
and
100% disabled for, and I'm challenging you. Like
No.
100% disabled for being PTSD.
I'm ready to answer the challenge.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you asked me this. So for folks that are in that circumstance saying, I am not a disabled person, I don't want to be called disabled. This is what I'd say. All right, look, guys, or look, sir, ma'am,
Guys or gals?
gals,
Yeah,
sir, ma'am.
everybody, people.
When you came into the military, you were in a certain state of health. When you left the military, you were in a certain state of health. I'm not calling you disabled. The VA, they call it disability, but look at it like this. If you go to the doctor, they're going to give you a diagnosis. They might say you have this or this or this. That diagnosis, and this is where I kind of get kind of nerdy and lawyerly. The diagnosis is one thing. The disability is a regulation. It's the same kind of regulation that says certain things have to be done for you before you can get the VA loan for your house. This is the government respecting that you put time into your country, and how you came out physically on the other end isn't the same where you were on the first end. And at that point, I'd make jokes and I'd show pictures like me with like the reverse mullet looking svelte in my double-breasted European suit. And then I'd show pictures of me with my officer gun. I'd be like, we're not the same. We're not the same going in that we are coming out. This is something you are entitled to because you are one of the 1% who swore that oath and went through it. And then I would do the whole, even if you are having a hard time looking at this as something that you should receive, it's for your family. It's tax-free money. And then I would say, you seem like a responsible person. You are very disciplined. You're squared away. Any squared away person would want to make sure they are providing for their family. This is going to help you provide for your family. I mean, that would be one tack.
But
It depends on how they go at it about it. But it's a good way to put it out.
Yeah, the to me, the thing that you said that hit me is where you started your baseline, right? So if you're in the military, you have that physical, right? MAPS or whatever it was, like you have the physical, and and where you left, right? And I think you're the first person I've ever heard say that. Yeah. I've thought that many times in my mind, but at the end of it, it's like,
people,
where was I at?
Where be the
where was I at? No, but where was I at the end of it? Right? Like
I heard First Sergeant laughing. He's like, I know exactly what
but
that
where
is.
were you at the end of it? That's what I'm saying. Like, so like when I got out, like my hearing, like I can't hear, right?
What?
Good joke. And it's funny to everybody in the room. Most of the people are my friends. Like we're just joking. Like somebody says something like, "What do you say?" And they tell me. But when I was in my my late 30s and my kids were younger, and they were younger, right? So I'd be in the car or I'd be in the house, and my kids would say something to me, and I'd go, "What?" And they'd say something. I'd go, "What?" And they just go, "Never mind," right? Like forget about it. And like, what do they want to tell me? Like I missed something from that.
You know how you make that fun?
What?
Remember how Dave Chappelle would do the Lil Jon skit? And he'd go, "What?"
Yeah.
I just got my stepkids into that.
What?
They're
No,
doing
but-
it all the time.
no,
like my mother-in-law has bad
That's a
hearing.
great-
I'm like, don't do that with her.
But
What? Okay.
no, but David Chappelle, I don't think we're talking about.
Yeah.
But what I mean is like there's I think you said something other than the Chappelle reference, which is great.
I'm good at that.
But,
shit, sorry.
But it is like you did enter the military at a certain medical and mental thing, and when you leave, you have to be open with it. And I think, but there's still,
And you tell them,
it's gotten harder. But you have to understand too. Like I think when you talk about some things, this obviously is happening. I don't think I'm crazy by saying this, but there's a reason that we don't say things. If we look at someone, and I remember it vividly. There is like I want that dude who's missing his fucking leg to be taken care of. I want his family to be taken care of. And I look at myself and I say, I can't hear very well, right? Or like I got this going on. I'm like, that fucking guy deserves it more than I do.
But this is where I say, I'm like,
and this is what's happening.
We're talking about two different things. If I was talking to you, it'd be like, shit, we're talking about two different things.
It's the same.
No,
it's who we are.
It's who you are, but it's you are still squared away enough to know the nuance. To be like, we're not talking about you going to the clinic to get in line for the doctor.
I understand that completely. I have a job where I don't go to the VA. What I'm saying is there is definitely when we there has to be like, and these are things I throw these things that this could be conspiracy theory shit or what.
But
like,
if
in
you
my
know,
mind,
you know, though, the VA clinics do triage. There are certain people with certain conditions; they are going to get a higher level of priority than you.
No, I'm not. But I'm not talking about.
And they're hypothetical. I would say that, like, these guys are going to be.
If I'm realistic, I was in Texas, and one of the guys that worked for me was like, "I'm 40% disabled veteran." I was like, "What's wrong?" And I'm like, "I think I'm 20," and he's like, "I'm 40% disabled." I'm like, "What happened to you?" Like, this is 2006, 2007. Like,
sure,
motherfuckers should have been to war. He's like, "Oh, I was stationed at Fort Wainwright, and I got frostbite, and I got 40% disability for that." I'm like, do you ever plan on going to he's from, where are you from, Texas? Are you gonna leave Texas again? Nope. This fucking guy's, and when I heard that, I was like, you get 40% disability for getting frostbite for probably not fucking putting your, like, changing your socks or doing something right, but irrelevant. But there is a judgment of, there is definitely like,
look at me knowing shit
when we're talking to each other, or you're talking to somebody about your disability rating. By the way. There is a stigma that's still out there, and the biggest stigma that I worry about. I give a fuck about hearing. I give a fuck about arthritis. The biggest stigma we have is like
all the Coast Guard. We're all like tonight,
but it's mental illness. It's like, that's the thing. Is like, some guys are not going to say like I'm broke. No, or gals are like, I'm broke. Like, I get it, and because you look over and you see someone that's physically broken, right, and there's a lot of stuff that we got to break that.
Broken.
What's that?
Or they're mentally broken.
Yeah,
you can.
Or mentally, I've never heard that. That's a good one.
Yeah, I mean, you can tell. I know we're going to get into talking about Brad, but like, I truly believe.
But your view, like, I know you're thinking.
You can sometimes see it coming.
Yeah, you can and you can't. But I'm just saying, like, I think one of the great things that I'm challenging Mike a little bit about this is, because it's me, is
I like it.
You get like, and I'm doing it on purpose, but he's absolutely 100% right. You sign up where you were mentally, physically. You have a benchmark. When you leave, fucking tell people about it. Be honest about it.
And this is what you add when you have this conversation. And it doesn't have to be me. It could be anybody. Like, do you think whatever private company is going to look at you that way? Do you think, Nationwide or Progressive, and I'm not knocking Progressive because they are really good pro-military from the time I worked with them. Do you think Initech will use an office space company? Do you think they're going to look at you the same way? No, you have put in time, and there have been people along the way who have made sure that you are looked at differently because you put in that time to serve your freaking country,
Right.
which 99% of the country does not do. They are going to measure you when you came in. They are going to measure you when you came out. And if you're a little broken, it's not a reflection on you in a bad way. If anything, it's a reflection on the good you did.
Right.
And I get it. I get the pride.
That's important. Yeah,
That's,
and
the pride is always
it's
the
the good you
toughest
did,
part.
and it's the things that you sacrificed. So, like,
Yeah.
do what you got to do. Swallow your pride. Be honest about where you stand, and let there's a great VA reps that'll fight for you. And if you can't, there's a lot of people that there's a business that does it. So
I mean, it's like, look at the PACT Act. The burn pit legislation was the right thing to do.
it took a while, but it happened.
It took a while, and like we got a guy in Twinsburg. He did a lot of work with it, and I mean, for some of us that are coasties, some of us would go overseas and do like container inspections and stuff, and they had the same kind of issue. I mean, that stuff sticks with you forever. It really does.
So here comes a time where we're approaching the 2-hour limit.
Sorry I spoiled you so much, man.
No, it's awesome. It's been good. It's always fun. And
been
so
great.
one of the things that he just in the past like 15 minutes or so he talked about, Mike is not, the Coast Guard, we make a lot of jokes, but Mike is not immune to the reason why we started this podcast and the 501c3 back last year is he's been impacted by teammates or people that you've met that have committed suicide. So I think it's a good segue into honoring the tonight's veteran that we will continue to say made a bad choice. There's a couple of different people. He sent a couple of people that hit him hard. The other one that we didn't talk about before we get and talk about Brad, but Lieutenant Colonel Tim Bairstow, he was a Marine, was his neighbor. I wish I could honor every one of them. Maybe I will in a couple episodes down. But tonight, it comes to the dark part of every night, and why we've done this is to honor a service member who took their life and shouldn't have. But so tonight we're going to honor a Coastie. That's our first Coastie, and another Coast Guardsman. But tonight we're going to honor U.S. Coast Guard Lieutenant Bradley Hannon, who's 36 years old. Brad took his life on May 19th, 2010. Brad was born May 3rd, 1974 in Tuscumbia, Alabama. He graduated from Deschler High School in 1992 and was actually a member of the 1992 state championship football team. Brad entered the Coast Guard in 1997 and graduated from OCS in 2003. Brad was serving as operations officer at the National Response Center at Coast Guard headquarters in Washington, D.C. at the time of his death. Brad's awards and decorations include 4 Coast Guard's Achievement Medals with an operational distinguishing device, the Coast Guard Good Conduct Medal, National Defense Service Medal, the Armed Forces Service Medal, the Global War on Terror Service Medal, and the Coast Guard Rifle Expert Medal. Brad is survived by his wife, Heather Hannon, his daughter, Ashlyn Hannon, and his stepdaughter, Michaela Piper. And it's very important that we talk about, if anyone is watching, or if anybody that needs help, you definitely need to reach out. We keep talking about it. Reach out, be there to somebody. But if in all seriousness, you need to call the crisis hotline at 1-800-273-8255 or dial 988, or you can press or text 838-255. So. Time we've had a couple people on. This is as we get along. It's your time. I didn't know Brad. I hope we can honor him.
Son of a bitch, I miss Brad. When in 2009, and I was tired of working in firms and stuff. I was like, 2 things are going to happen. Either going to be like a family court judge or do divorce work. Divorce work for an attorney, it's hard because every client you have, most of them, they've never dealt with the court system, and then it's either about their money or their kids, and the rawest of raw emotions come out.
Yeah.
When I put in for the direct commission officer program, I had to interview with an officer panel, and Brad was one of the officers. He was at Marine Safety Unit Paducah, and we struck up a decent friendship. And so 09, I get picked up and I go to DCO school. You fast forward about a year in July of 10, and I was going up to DC for my first ever trying a court martial, due to he needed to be hammered. And I get this call, and the National Response Center that you mentioned. So, like if you're out on the lake and you see an oil slick or something, you call the NRC. They take reports on things like oil spills and stuff. These are all post Exxon Valdez things that happened over the year. And Brad was a prevention officer, Marine Safety Unit Paducah. They would handle vessel inspections of the towboats and stuff. And I got to know him. He met his wife in St. Louis, which is kind of bittersweet too, because my current reserve unit is at U.S. Transportation Command in Scott Air Force Base near St. Louis. But anyway, I'm going through getting ready for my first court martial, and I get the call that he had taken his life. And the shitty part of it was those of us who knew him knew that something was going on. And this is where I'm like, a lot of folks, you can tell it's coming, but you can't always stop it unless you just have like persistent 24/7 monitoring on him. I mean, Brad would probably be a fucking captain by now if he was still on. And I sent you the one picture of him where he had like his high and tight moto haircut, and he's looking at me like this when I'm signing my contract paperwork. But he was a really good guy, and he was a good husband, and he's a good dad, and he's one of many. I mean, I keep reflecting on the fact that like I'm from two professions that have high percentages of a suicide, and I know lawyers who were never in the military, and I know military members who took their lives, and it sucks.
Right.
It sucks. And I've had my own dark moments too, and I'm sure we all have. There's no reason it should happen. There's no fucking reason it should happen.
Yeah, we talked about
it.
And that's why it's an honor to be able to honor Brad and talk about him. But the things we keep talking about is like, reach out, be there, be resilient. It's all these kind of things that you have to do is like, reach out. Honestly, we talked about before, obviously I'll say it again, the Veterans Crisis Line, the professionals, dial 988, dial in at 100-273-8255 or press 1 or text or text 838-255, but also reach out to whoever you feel comfortable, who your battle buddy is, or to reach out. But the key thing is like, honestly, to reach out, and number one is to listen, to be there. If someone reaches out to you, we talk about this a lot of time. If someone starts talking, a couple weeks ago, we had a professional on that says, if someone's telling you they're going to kill themselves, they're fucking going to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this isn't like if someone is comfortable enough to tell you that, the next step is to get that person help. So again, we're going to end episode 27 here. Can't believe it. We have our last, hopefully it's not our last Coast Guardsman, but there's so few far in between. We had our first.
That's all right.
Hopefully last, so I don't have to put that flag up. I'm joking. I'm joking.
If you're willing to get all the way, you need to get like the NOAA Commission Officer Corps. then you'll really get everybody.
So we're gonna end it like I have a couple quotes to end it with. I have what he was talking. Mike's trying to act all cool and stuff. He never saw Guardian, so we have to have a Guardian quote, and then we'll go to the real a real Coast Guard quote, but. To quote Captain William Hadley, which you said all these kind of things that brought you down, which is so funny because we never talked about this. And it's just to hear you in the first few minutes to talk about him for the movie The Guardian. One of the things he says is there's a legend of a man who lives beneath the sea. Right.
The Kurgan.
He is a fisher of men, a last hope for all who have been left behind. Many survivors claim to have felt his gripping hands beneath them, pushing them up to the surface, whispering strength until help can arrive. A pretty powerful quote from a movie. If you really like, I ask you to listen to that, and it's what actually you didn't like the movie, but I feel like there's a lot of people that were.
There's some good stuff about it.
Yeah, it's good on that. So that's the movie, the movie quote. So we'll end it with a Coast Guard, a real Coast Guard quote, and hopefully get to that. But says that we do this job because every once in a while someone is out there without hope, desperately praying for their life. And we get to be the answer. It's an anonymous quote, and that's a pretty powerful quote if you think about it. If you've if you've ever been in the ocean and you jumped out of a boat and realized how vast the ocean is, or even the Great Lakes that you talked about, you've been signed. So it's a great quote. So it's a great thing. So I want to thank you for coming on, Mike. Thanks for making the trip.
Thank you.
Episode 27. We'll see everybody in a couple weeks. Episode 28. Definitely not a Coast Guardsman. We're joking. No, we're kidding. But again, thank you everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you all in a couple weeks. Thanks, Mike, for coming on.
Semper P. Thanks, brother.
Thanks, brother.
Thank you.